Welcome to SnoozyTor, where history's forgotten chapters are retold as vivid journeys for the mind. Tonight, we enter a story of smoke and silver, of empires and addiction. The tale of how a single flower, the opium poppy, changed the fate of the world's oldest civilization. From the bustling tea houses of Canton to the burning forts on the Pearl River. From imperial edicts in the Forbidden City to the thunder of British cannons on the Yangtze. This is the rise of the opium trade, the humiliation of a great empire, and the beginning of China's century of struggle. It is not only a story of war but of weakness, corruption, greed, and survival. A reminder that the fall of empires often begins not with armies, but with addiction and forgotten choices. So lie back, close your eyes, and let SnoozyTor guide you through the Opium Wars, history's most devastating collision of tradition and modern power. The story begins not in China, but in the fields of Bengal and Bihar, under the blazing Indian sun. Here, in the late 18th century, the British East India Company discovered a plant that would change the course of empires: the poppy. Its delicate flowers seemed harmless, even beautiful. Yet inside their seed pods lay a resin with the power to enslave millions, the resin that would become opium. By the 1780s, Britain faced a serious economic dilemma. Its appetite for Chinese goods, tea, porcelain, and silk, was insatiable. Every year, ships laden with these luxuries sailed from Canton to London, fueling a craze for Chinese culture in Britain's drawing rooms. But the Chinese wanted little in return. They demanded silver and only silver. As a result, the precious metal drained out of Britain in alarming quantities, threatening the balance of its economy. For Britain's merchants, it was a one-way street: silver out, tea in. Something had to change. The solution came in the form of opium. The East India Company held a monopoly over poppy cultivation in India. Farmers, coerced by company agents, planted fields of the crop instead of rice or wheat. They scored the seed pods, scraped the sticky brown sap, and packed it into chests. Each chest weighed about 140 pounds. Soon, thousands were being produced every year. The company auctioned the opium in Calcutta, selling it to private traders who then shipped it to Canton, despite the fact that opium importation was officially illegal in China. At first, the trade was modest, hidden in the shadows. Smugglers would carry the drug on fast boats, offload it at coastal villages, and slip it into Canton through a network of Chinese intermediaries. The initial customers were wealthy elites and officials, curious about this exotic foreign substance. But demand grew quickly. What began as a fashionable indulgence became a habit, and then an epidemic. By the turn of the 19th century, opium smoking had spread far beyond the elite. Sailors, merchants, laborers, all began to fall under its spell. Canton's narrow alleys filled with secret dens where the air was thick with sweet, acrid smoke. Inside, men lay stretched on wooden platforms, eyes glazed, pipes in hand, drifting in and out of a dreamlike haze. Families sold possessions to support the habit. Work productivity declined. The first cracks appeared in China's great social fabric. The Chinese government understood the danger. Imperial edicts banning opium had existed since 1729. But bans on paper were one thing, enforcement was another. Corruption was everywhere. Local officials often turned a blind eye, or worse, became smokers themselves. The irony was grotesque. Men tasked with stamping out the trade could not lift their pens without first lifting their pipes. British traders, meanwhile, perfected their methods. They anchored ships off the Chinese coast, beyond the jurisdiction of Qing officials. From these receiving ships, fast Chinese smuggling boats would collect the opium under cover of night and ferry it inland. Everyone along the chain took their cut: smugglers, merchants, guards, even local magistrates. By the 1820s, the trade was booming. Tens of thousands of chests entered China each year, and the silver that once flowed into Beijing's coffers now hemorrhaged outward. For the British merchants, it was a golden age. The profits were staggering. A chest bought in India for a few hundred silver dollars could fetch over 1,000 in Canton. Firms like Jardine Matheson and Company and Dent and Company built fortunes on the drug. In London, tea became cheaper and more plentiful than ever. Ordinary Britons sipped their cups in comfort, unaware, or uninterested, that their pleasure was funded by the misery of another people. But in China, the poison spread. Scholars in tea houses debated bitterly. "The barbarians bring poison and take our silver," one lamented, "and our own officials smoke it with them." Others spoke of villages in the interior planting poppies themselves. China was not merely importing a foreign curse, it was beginning to cultivate its own. Still, for many ordinary people, opium seemed less a poison than a relief. Life in 19th century China was harsh. Farmers endured backbreaking labor, floods, and famine. Laborers in Canton's bustling markets toiled endlessly. A few pipes of opium offered escape, a fleeting warmth, a dream beyond suffering. And once that dream was tasted, it was nearly impossible to let go. By the 1830s, the scale of the crisis could no longer be ignored. The Qing government faced not only the decay of its people but also a fiscal disaster. Silver was leaving the empire in such quantities that tax revenues collapsed. Soldiers went unpaid. Provinces fell into unrest. The empire, once the richest in the world, now bled wealth from every vein. The irony was as tragic as it was absurd. China, the Middle Kingdom, self-proclaimed center of civilization, was being hollowed out not by foreign armies or invasions, but by a flower. And the merchants profiting most from this flower were protected by a distant island nation whose own laws forbade recreational opium use at home. In Britain, to smoke opium was scandalous. In China, to sell it was business. Thus the seeds of poison had been planted. What began as a trade solution for Britain became a national crisis for China. The poppy's delicate petals concealed a storm, one that would soon sweep across empires and redraw the map of the world. The Chinese emperor in Beijing had yet to grasp its full gravity. But in Canton's smoke-filled rooms, and in the empty coffers of the treasury, the warning signs were clear. The stage was set. And soon, the empire would be forced to confront a reckoning unlike anything in its long history. Imagine Britain in the late 18th century. Parlors and drawing rooms across the country echo with the clinking of porcelain cups. Tea is no longer a luxury reserved for the aristocracy. It has become a daily ritual for every class of society. Dockworkers in Liverpool drink it before long shifts. Clerks in London sip it during afternoon breaks. Aristocrats host elaborate tea parties with fine porcelain imported from China. The nation is obsessed. But this obsession has a hidden cost. Every chest of tea shipped from Canton must be paid for in silver. Year after year, the silver flows out of Britain and into China's imperial treasury. British officials watch with alarm. Their empire thrives on trade and profit. Yet in this exchange, the balance is entirely one-sided. Britain receives tea, silk, and porcelain. China demands nothing in return except bullion. "The Chinese are eating us alive in silver," one merchant complained. "We give them treasure and they give us leaves." At first, Britain tries to balance the books with woolens, iron goods, and other exports. But Chinese markets are unmoved. To the Middle Kingdom, foreign products are inferior. Chinese silk, porcelain, and tea are prized abroad. Why should China need British cloth or machinery? Canton's officials dismiss Western wares with disdain. And so the silver drain continues. This imbalance threatens more than the economy, it threatens imperial stability. Britain depends on imports of Chinese tea to satisfy domestic demand, but it cannot allow its reserves of silver to vanish. The East India Company, guardian of Britain's Asian empire, begins to search desperately for a solution. They find it in India's fields of poppies. Opium becomes the empire's lever, the tool to pry open China's markets without permission. The scheme is simple in its cruelty. Grow the poppy in India, refine it into opium, ship it to Canton, and exchange it for silver. Use that silver to buy Chinese tea and send it back to Britain. The cycle is closed. Tea for Britain, silver for Britain, addiction for China. By the early 1800s, this triangular trade is running with ruthless efficiency. Auction houses in Calcutta buzz with excitement as chest after chest of opium goes under the hammer. Private merchants bid fiercely, knowing the profits in Canton will be immense. The East India Company collects its revenue up front, washing its hands of responsibility. The private merchants take the risk, and the reward, of smuggling it into China. In Canton, the results are immediate. Opium pours into the city, hidden in small boats, offloaded at night, and distributed by an intricate network of Chinese brokers. The British merchants stay behind high walls in their factories, officially aloof, but in reality orchestrating the trade through intermediaries. Everyone profits along the chain. Smugglers, middlemen, corrupt officials, foreign traders. Everyone, that is, except the countless Chinese families who watch loved ones waste away in smoke-filled dens. The economic effects ripple outward. Silver that once flowed into the imperial treasury now flows back out, carried in the holds of British ships. Officials report a shocking decline in revenue. Taxes go unpaid. Soldiers are short of wages. Provincial treasuries collapse. A fiscal crisis begins to gnaw at the foundations of the empire. But the merchants in London see only prosperity. The tea trade stabilizes. Silver reserves recover. The balance sheet looks healthy once again. To them, opium is not poison. It is salvation. They cloak the trade in language of free markets and enterprise. We merely meet demand, they argue. No one forces the Chinese to smoke. It is the rhetoric of convenience, a denial of the human devastation unfolding across the sea. Inside China, however, the devastation cannot be denied. In villages once prosperous with rice harvests, men now spend their days in stupor. Productivity collapses. Fields lie fallow. Families pawn heirlooms for another pipe. In tea houses, scholars debate the paradox. They sell us poison, says one, and we pay them with the silver that should build our nation. Another replies bitterly, but our own people buy it, our own officials smoke it. Who is truly to blame? This is the cruel genius of the trade. Britain does not conquer China with soldiers or cannon, not yet. It conquers with addiction, turning Chinese demand against itself. The empire's economy bends, its people weaken, its leaders grow compromised. The poison becomes not only tolerated but integrated into the very fabric of society. Silver becomes smoke. Smoke becomes dependency. Dependency becomes decline. By the 1820s, the numbers are staggering. Imports soar to over 20,000 chests per year. Each chest represents countless pipes smoked, countless lives diminished. The drain of silver accelerates. Imperial memorials reach Beijing with dire warnings. Our wealth bleeds away to the barbarians. Our people are enslaved by the pipe. If unchecked, the empire itself will falter. Yet for all the warnings, action is slow. Some officials profit from the trade. Others are too fearful to confront it. Still others are themselves addicts, chained to the very substance they are meant to suppress. The emperor, far away in the Forbidden City, knows he faces a crisis, but the scale is still only half grasped. In Britain, meanwhile, the cycle of tea, silver, and smoke continues unabated. Ships arrive in London bearing tea that tastes of triumph, sweetened by sugar from Caribbean plantations and consumed by millions every day. Ordinary Britons sip comfort from porcelain cups, never realizing, or never caring, that their pleasure is paid for by another people's misery. Every steaming cup of tea carries the scent of Canton's smoke-filled dens. Every sip is linked to the slow unraveling of a civilization thousands of miles away. Thus the pattern is set: tea for Britain, silver for Britain, smoke for China. An empire drinks while another empire weakens. And the poppy fields of India bloom endlessly, feeding the cycle of addiction, trade, and despair. The balance of the world has shifted. China remains proud, still calling itself the Middle Kingdom, the center of civilization. But beneath the pride, its foundations tremble. Britain has found its weapon, and it is not a cannon or a musket. It is a flower. The alleys of Canton by night smell of smoke, salt, and secrets. Lanterns swing above narrow streets as vendors pack away their stalls. But behind shuttered doors, another commerce awakens. You follow the faint, sweet sour scent that drifts like a ghost through the city. It leads you to a doorway half hidden in shadow. Inside, you glimpse a room thick with haze, voices murmuring, pipes glowing. An opium den. At first glance, it almost seems peaceful. Men recline on raised wooden platforms, their heads resting on small bamboo pillows. They exhale streams of bluish smoke that curl upward and mingle in the stagnant air. The flicker of oil lamps gives their faces a strange pallor, somewhere between sleep and death. They are lost in dreams, oblivious to the world around them. But the peace is an illusion. Look closer and you see the cost. The men's bodies are emaciated, their cheeks sunken, their limbs frail. Some twitch in their sleep, trapped between intoxication and withdrawal. Others lie motionless, lips slack, the pipe slipping from their fingers. A thin attendant hurries to catch it, refills the bowl with black tar and presses it back into place. The cycle continues: inhale, drift, fade. These dens are multiplying across southern China. Once the pastime of wealthy elites, opium smoking has spread to artisans, coolies, and peasants. For a few copper coins, a laborer can buy a pipe and escape the back-breaking toil of the docks or the fields. A few moments of warmth, of floating, of forgetting hunger. But the price is always higher than the smoker imagines. The drug that soothes also enslaves. A man smokes one pipe to escape his pain, then another to escape his cravings, until he smokes only to feel normal again. Families feel the impact first. Wives pawn jewelry, daughters sell embroidery, sons abandon their studies, all to support a father's addiction. A single household can collapse within months. Across neighborhoods, productivity plummets. Fields go untended. Ships unload slower. Taxes shrink. The rot spreads silently, like mold beneath painted walls. And the dens themselves become centers of corruption. Owners bribe local officials to look the other way. Constables who should enforce imperial law instead collect inspection fees. Some officials openly frequent the dens, smoking alongside the very men they are meant to police. A grotesque spectacle unfolds. Magistrates addicted, soldiers impaired, clerks nodding off over imperial documents. China's bureaucracy, once the pride of the empire, begins to suffocate under the haze. The foreign merchants know exactly what is happening, and they exploit it mercilessly. In the foreign factories along the waterfront, British traders conduct business by day, then watch from balconies as smuggling boats scurry like ants across the Pearl River by night. They do not set foot in the dens, not themselves. But they profit from every pipe smoked, every chest sold, every coin of silver drained from Chinese pockets. In private gatherings, they defend their trade with cynical ease. We merely provide what they desire, one declares over glasses of wine. No one forces them to smoke. His companion laughs. Indeed, we could not make such profits unless they welcomed the pipe. Yet beneath the bravado, unease sometimes flickers. Some know that what they are doing in China would never be tolerated in London. In Britain, opium is confined to medicine, strictly regulated. An opium den in Soho would provoke outrage. But in Canton it is accepted, because it is profitable. For ordinary Chinese, however, the consequences are unavoidable. The smell of opium becomes as common as the smell of cooking rice. Children learn to recognize the smoke before they can read. Songs are written about the black dream that takes fathers away. In some villages, more than half the adult men are addicted. The dens, once hidden, now advertise openly, lanterns with painted poppies swaying at their entrances. They are no longer secrets. They are institutions. A traveler in Canton in the 1820s described it vividly. In every quarter of the city, I found houses where men lay like corpses, pipes clutched in skeletal fingers. The attendants moved among them like shadows, stoking fires, feeding the hunger that never ends. The air itself seemed poisoned, as if one could become addicted simply by breathing it. The Qing government issues edicts again and again. Officials write stern memorials to the emperor. The poison corrodes our people, drains our wealth, and weakens our armies. Yet these edicts are parchment against the tide. Every attempt at enforcement collapses under corruption or resistance. Arrest one smuggler and another appears. Shut down one den and three more open. The addiction spreads faster than the law can contain it. And still the people come. Dockworkers whose muscles ache from hauling cargo. Peasants ruined by floods who cannot face another season of hunger. Students who fail their exams and seek forgetfulness. Soldiers weary of endless drills. They lie down on wooden platforms, take the pipe, and drift into smoke-filled dreams. The dens offer comfort, but it is comfort that devours them from within. By the late 1820s, Canton is no longer just a great trading port. It is a city divided between the bustling waterfront where merchants strike deals worth millions, and the dark alleys where men sell everything they own for another pipe. Silver still flows, but not into the emperor's coffers. It flows into the pockets of foreign traders and their Chinese partners. The balance of wealth and of power begins to shift. The dens of darkness are not just places. They are symptoms. They reveal the deeper sickness spreading through the empire. A society unable to resist temptation, a government unable to enforce its will, and a world economy tilting against China. In every curl of smoke lies the seed of decline. And in every wasted addict lies the proof that decline has already begun. Every empire depends on its officials. In theory, the Qing dynasty's bureaucracy is the envy of the world, a carefully constructed hierarchy of mandarins, scholars, and magistrates selected through rigorous civil service examinations. They are supposed to embody Confucian virtue, ruling not through force but through moral example. They are the guardians of order, the hands and voice of the emperor himself. But in practice, by the 1820s and 1830s, many of these guardians are enslaved to the very poison they are meant to eradicate. The opium pipe has invaded not just Canton's alleys but the inner chambers of government. Imagine a district magistrate's office in Yangtze. The court is full. Peasants kneeling with petitions, clerks scratching with brushes, constables standing ready with bamboo rods. But at the center of it all, the magistrate sits slumped behind his desk, his eyes half closed. Before him, not an inkstone but a small pipe, its bowl still warm from the last smoke. His orders are vague, his decisions delayed. Bribes slip more easily into his weakened hand. Justice itself is clouded by smoke. Reports from across the empire tell the same story. Governors general smoke before meetings. Military officers light pipes before giving orders. Even the palace itself is not untouched. Whispers spread of courtiers, eunuchs, even imperial relatives succumbing to the haze. When officials charged with enforcement are themselves addicts, the law becomes a farce. It is like asking alcoholics to enforce prohibition, or gamblers to regulate casinos. The system devours itself from within. Foreign merchants watch this corruption with both cynicism and delight. At gatherings in their Canton factories they exchange stories. One boasts of bribing a customs inspector with a chest of opium rather than silver. Another laughs about an official who, after condemning the drug in public, begged privately for a supply to ease his cravings. The Celestial Empire, one trader remarks with mock solemnity, is being governed by smoke. Chinese scholars see it differently. In the tea houses and academies, their conversations are filled with despair. How can we save the people, asks one, when those entrusted with saving them are themselves poisoned? Another replies bitterly, it is not the barbarians who destroy us. It is our own weakness, our own officials who choose the pipe over duty. The tone is less anger than grief, as if the Confucian moral order, the foundation of the dynasty, is crumbling in plain sight. And beneath this corruption lies another force: money. The opium trade has become a vast underground economy, feeding countless pockets. Provincial treasuries, strapped for silver, quietly tax smuggling routes. Constables collect inspection fees from dens. High officials take cuts from syndicates. Even some members of the emperor's own household, it is whispered, receive gifts of opium or profit from the trade. The emperor, Daoguang, receives conflicting memorials. Some warn urgently of national disaster. Others minimize the problem, claiming the crisis is exaggerated. He issues edicts banning opium again and again, but each one is like a reed in a storm, bending and breaking under the weight of corruption. His words rarely reach the streets of Canton, and when they do, they are ignored. Meanwhile, the addicts grow in number. One memorial from Guangdong province reported that in a single district, out of 1,000 men, nearly 200 smoked daily. Among soldiers, the proportion was even higher. Imagine an army preparing for battle, its muskets loaded, its banners flying, yet behind the bravado, half the soldiers wheeze from addiction, their hands trembling, their strength sapped. A nation cannot defend itself when its defenders are enslaved to the pipe. The corruption eats deeper still. Families of officials suffer too. Sons inherit their fathers' habits. Household treasuries vanish into the smoke. Wives sell jewelry to maintain appearances. Concubines are traded away for debts. Entire lineages that once carried the pride of the scholar official class fall into disgrace, their libraries pawned, their estates mortgaged. The poison does not stop at the skin. It seeps into the bloodline, staining the dynasty itself. Foreign observers marvel at how easily their bribes succeed. In London, opium merchants defend themselves before Parliament by pointing to Chinese complicity. We offer the goods, but it is their officials who allow it, their people who crave it, they argue. The hypocrisy is breathtaking. Britain strictly controls opium at home. Dens are unthinkable in London or Liverpool. Yet here in Canton they profit by exploiting a weakness that the Chinese government cannot or will not control. The truth is darker still. By the 1830s, the Chinese economy itself is beginning to depend on the trade. Farmers in the southwest plant poppies instead of rice, lured by high profits. Local treasuries quietly accept taxes from this cultivation. The poison is not merely tolerated, it is woven into the fiscal fabric of the empire. The addiction is no longer only in the body of individuals. It is in the body of the state. And so, the paradox deepens. Officials speak of eradicating opium, yet depend on its revenue. Soldiers denounce it, yet smoke it themselves. Merchants curse its devastation, yet grow rich from its trade. China, the Middle Kingdom, proclaims moral superiority, yet drowns in hypocrisy. The empire's facade remains grand. Imperial edicts, Confucian rituals, dragon thrones, but beneath the lacquer rot spreads silently. The great irony is this: the opium crisis does not topple China with a single blow. It hollows it out from the inside like termites eating through a beam until one day the structure collapses under its own weight. Foreign merchants could never have succeeded so completely without Chinese complicity. The empire's downfall is not only imposed from abroad, it is invited from within. By the end of the 1830s, the corruption is undeniable. The emperor grows desperate, searching for someone incorruptible, someone who can break the cycle, someone who can cleanse the empire of smoke. And so he turns to a single man, a stern scholar known for his discipline, feared by corrupt officials across the provinces. His name is Lin Zexu. The stage is set for confrontation. But before Lin's arrival in Canton, the corruption of the 1820s and 1830s has already done its work. The empire he is about to defend is already weakened, its officials compromised, its coffers drained. Lin will strike hard, but the poison has already seeped too deep. Amid the haze of smoke and the rot of corruption, not every voice in China was silent. There were still scholars, reformers, and patriots who saw the danger clearly and refused to look away. In tea houses, academies, and private studies, a quiet rebellion was taking shape, not with weapons but with words. These men and women knew that opium was not merely a drug. It was a poison corroding the moral foundation of the empire, a sickness that would destroy China from within if left unchecked. In a crowded tea house near Canton's waterfront, two scholars sit hunched over steaming cups. Their robes are simple, their faces lined with worry. One leans forward, his voice sharp. The barbarians bring poison and take our silver, and our own people welcome them with open arms. Tell me, how long can the Middle Kingdom endure this? His companion shakes his head. When I served as magistrate in Yangtze, my superior smoked 3 pipes a day. How can we enforce laws when the law enforcers themselves are slaves to the pipe? The corruption is worse than the drug. Their words echo the frustration of countless others. Memorials arrive in Beijing from loyal officials who still dare to speak truth. Opium is a national calamity, one report declares. It drains our silver, it weakens our soldiers, it corrupts our officials. If it is not eradicated, the dynasty itself may not survive. Another warns, the barbarians grow rich on our misery. Every pipe smoked is a coin stolen from the empire. We must act, or we will be remembered as the generation that lost China. Some voices call for moral reform. Confucian scholars argue that the heart of the crisis is not economic but ethical. To them, opium is the ultimate violation of filial duty and social harmony. A man who wastes himself in smoke fails his family, his ancestors, and the state. Our sages taught us to cultivate virtue, one scholar writes. Yet our people cultivate poppies. How can heaven continue to bless such a nation? Others argue in practical terms. Military officers warn that addiction is crippling the army. Reports circulate of soldiers who cannot march without their daily pipe, of sentries who fall asleep at their posts, of generals who negotiate bribes rather than battles. If war comes, one memorial bluntly states, we will not be defeated by enemy cannon, but by our own weakness. The foreign merchants hear these rumblings too. In their factories, they mock the scholars' protests. They whine about poison, sneers one British trader, Yet their own people line up to buy it. Who forces them? No one. His companion adds with a smirk, if they truly despised it, they would burn the fields, sink the boats, and hang the smugglers. Instead, they write poems. We are safe. But the poets and scholars do more than write poems. They inspire a rising tide of moral outrage. Plays are staged in provincial theaters, depicting fathers ruined by addiction, mothers weeping, families collapsing. Popular ballads circulate, warning of the black smoke that steals men's souls. Even among the common people, a sense of unease spreads. Everyone knows someone lost to the pipe. Everyone feels the drain of silver. Everyone wonders how much longer this can continue. In Beijing, the Daoguang Emperor listens. He is a cautious man, often hesitant, but the memorials pile high on his desk. Some argue for legalization and taxation, claiming the empire cannot fight both the demand and the corruption. Others demand total eradication. The debates rage in the Forbidden City's halls, but one thing is certain: the crisis can no longer be ignored. One official in particular, a stern scholar named Lin Zexu, rises above the others. His memorials are uncompromising. To allow opium is to betray the people, he writes. To profit from it is to betray the state. We cannot negotiate with poison. We must eradicate it utterly. His words strike like thunder. Where others hedge or soften their language, Lin is absolute. Resistance also takes smaller, quieter forms. In villages, some communities begin burning poppy fields. In temples, monks preach against the sin of addiction. In households, mothers beg their sons to quit before it is too late. These acts may seem small compared to the vast tide of smuggling and corruption, but they reveal something vital. China is not wholly asleep. There are still those who see clearly and fight in whatever way they can. Yet resistance is not without risk. Officials who speak too boldly often find themselves demoted, reassigned, or quietly silenced. Merchants who refuse to deal in opium are undercut by rivals who embrace it. Even scholars who write too passionately can draw the suspicion of censors. To oppose opium in the 1830s is not just to fight a drug. It is to fight the inertia of an entire system. Still, the voices grow louder. Tea houses buzz with debate. Academies circulate essays condemning the trade. Newspapers whisper rumors of new imperial edicts. And in the heart of Beijing, the emperor begins to consider a decisive move. Perhaps, just perhaps, it is time to send an incorruptible man to Canton with full powers to confront the foreigners and crush the trade once and for all. For now, though, resistance remains a chorus of voices, earnest, angry, fearful, hopeful. They cannot yet stop the tide, but they can warn of the storm. They are the conscience of a nation that has not entirely surrendered to smoke. As one scholar writes in his final memorial before retiring in disgust, if we continue on this path, the barbarians will not need to conquer us. We will conquer ourselves. Our cities will fall not to cannon fire, but to ash. Yet if heaven still favors the Middle Kingdom, let it send us men who fear no bribe, men who hold virtue above profit, men who will break the pipe and scatter its smoke. Only then may China rise again. In the vast, echoing halls of the Forbidden City, the Daoguang Emperor sat surrounded by silence. Outside, snow drifted gently onto Beijing's tiled roofs, muffling the capital in winter calm. Yet inside the imperial palace, the emperor's desk overflowed with memorials from the south, grim reports of corruption, addiction, and silver bleeding out of the empire like lifeblood from a wound. He read them one by one. A magistrate begging for relief, claiming entire villages had abandoned rice farming for poppy fields. A general confessing that half his soldiers were too weak to march. A scholar lamenting that the poison corrodes our bones and drains our wealth into barbarian hands. The emperor's brow furrowed. The words were heavy, but the reality they described was heavier still. Daoguang was not blind to the crisis. He had already issued edicts against opium more than once. Yet the pipe still burned. Each new decree seemed to vanish like smoke before reaching the streets of Canton. He could not trust local officials to enforce his will. Too many were compromised, bribed, or addicts themselves. But to admit this truth openly was dangerous. The legitimacy of the dynasty rested on the image of harmony between throne and officials. How could the Son of Heaven rule if his servants disobeyed? In the Forbidden City's inner court, the debate raged. Some advisors urged pragmatism. Legalize the trade, they argued. Tax it, regulate it, turn the barbarians' poison into revenue for the empire. Better to control it than to fight a battle we cannot win. They pointed to the treasury's decline, to unpaid soldiers, to silver fleeing the country at alarming rates. Your Majesty, one minister warned, we cannot risk bankruptcy for the sake of virtue. Others argued the opposite, appealing to morality and tradition. To permit opium, they countered, is to sanction national suicide. It robs the people of their health, their families, their productivity. It undermines the moral foundation of the dynasty. Better to risk hardship than to abandon righteousness. These men framed the issue not as economics but as cosmic order. To them, opium was more than a drug, it was a violation of heaven's mandate. Caught between these factions, Daoguang hesitated. He was a man of caution by nature, neither reckless nor decisive. The empire he inherited was vast, but its power rested on fragile foundations. A rigid bureaucracy, a tradition-bound military, a population restless with famine and flood. To act rashly might destabilize everything. But to do nothing was to allow the poison to spread unchecked. The dilemma tormented him. At night, he paced the palace gardens, lantern in hand, speaking quietly to trusted eunuchs. He asked questions that had no easy answers. Could the empire survive an outright confrontation with Britain, whose ships and cannons were rumored to be unmatched? Could he risk angering the very officials who were supposed to enforce his policies? Could he balance morality with pragmatism, or was he doomed to choose between them? Meanwhile, the reports grew more desperate. Provincial treasuries complained they could not meet their quotas. Soldiers rioted for unpaid wages. Merchants warned that foreign silver was vanishing so quickly that common coins were disappearing from daily use. Families who once paid taxes in silver now bartered with grain or cloth. The empire's fiscal machinery, centuries in the making, was breaking down. Daoguang's court knew the truth, though few dared to speak it aloud. China's strength was an illusion. Its armies still wore bright uniforms and carried banners, but their weapons were outdated, their training neglected. Its bureaucracy still produced learned scholars who could recite the Confucian classics, but few understood the mechanics of global trade or the Industrial Revolution transforming the West. The Middle Kingdom still thought itself the center of civilization, but in reality, it was falling behind. The emperor faced another fear as well, the people. If he cracked down too harshly on opium, millions of addicts would suffer withdrawals. Disorder might erupt in every province. Farmers might rise in rebellion, workers might riot, soldiers might mutiny. The dynasty could collapse not from foreign invasion but from domestic upheaval. Half the city would rise in pain if we banned it outright, one governor admitted. The words haunted Daoguang. And yet, to permit the trade was unthinkable. Every pipe smoked was a humiliation, a symbol of the throne's impotence. Every chest of silver shipped abroad was a reminder that China was no longer in control of its destiny. The emperor's pride as the son of heaven clashed with his fear as a ruler of men. It was in this atmosphere of despair and paralysis that a solution began to take shape. The emperor realized that edicts and proclamations were not enough. What he needed was a man, an official who could act with iron resolve where others had failed. A man incorruptible, fearless, and utterly devoted to the empire's survival. Such men were rare, almost mythical. But one name emerged again and again from the memorials: Lin Zexu. Lin's reputation was fearsome. As governor of Hunan and Hubei, he had earned the nickname Blue Sky Lin for his honesty and severity. Bribes had no effect on him. Corruption shriveled in his presence. He was known to work tirelessly, rising before dawn and laboring until night, punishing negligence and rewarding diligence. In an empire drowning in smoke, he was a breath of clear air. The emperor's dilemma then resolved into a choice. He could continue to vacillate, issuing edicts that no one obeyed, or he could send Lin to Canton with full authority to eradicate the opium trade once and for all. It was a gamble, perhaps even a desperate one. But the alternative, inaction, seemed worse. And so, after weeks of agonized deliberation, the Daoguang emperor summoned his scribes. An edict was drafted. Lin Zexu, imperial commissioner, was to travel south to Canton with unlimited powers. His mission was simple in words but monumental in reality: end the opium trade no matter the cost. The emperor sealed the edict with trembling hands. His dilemma was not solved. He had merely passed it to another. But in doing so, he set in motion events that would ignite a storm across China and the world. The stage was shifting from indecision in Beijing to confrontation in Canton. March 1839. The city of Canton wakes to the sound of drums and banners snapping in the breeze. Crowds press against the streets, craning their necks for a glimpse of the imperial procession winding its way toward the foreign factories on the waterfront. At its center is a sedan chair carried by 8 men. Behind silk curtains sits the man who will soon become both feared and admired. Lin Zexu, the emperor's iron-handed commissioner. Lin is not what most imagined. He is no towering general with scarred armor, no fearsome warrior from the old chronicles. Instead, he is a scholar, 54 years old, thin, with a modest bearing and calm expression. Yet there is something in his eyes, a steel-hard determination, that unsettles even the boldest onlookers. "He looks ordinary," whispers a merchant in the crowd, "but they say even the most corrupt tremble when he enters their district." Another replies, "The emperor chose well. If anyone can stop the foreign poison, it is him." Lin's reputation precedes him. In Hunan and Hubei he was known for unrelenting honesty. Bribes bounced off him like arrows against armor. Lazy officials feared his inspections. Corrupt ones dreaded his punishments. He worked tirelessly, rising before dawn, scrutinizing reports, visiting villages, and demanding the same of his subordinates. Blue Sky Lin, the people called him for his clarity and incorruptibility. Now he has been entrusted with the greatest challenge of his career, to end the opium trade. His strategy is immediate and uncompromising. Within days of arrival, Lin orders raids on local opium dens. Pipes are confiscated, addicts rounded up, smugglers dragged in chains through the streets. Wealthy dealers who once walked freely under the protection of bribes now tremble before the commissioner's court. Some are sentenced to prison, a few to death. Public executions send a chilling message: the age of tolerance is over. But Lin knows that striking at Chinese dealers is only half the battle. The heart of the trade lies with the foreigners. In the grand foreign factories along the Pearl River, British merchants, Jardine, Dent, Matheson, control the flow of opium. They are wealthy, arrogant, accustomed to bribing officials and evading decrees. To challenge them directly is to risk international conflict. Yet Lin is undeterred. He drafts an ultimatum. Every foreign merchant must surrender their opium stocks within 3 days or face severe consequences. The order is delivered in formal Chinese calligraphy, sealed with the emperor's authority. To show his seriousness, Lin has the factories surrounded by imperial troops. No food or supplies are allowed in. Chinese servants are ordered to leave their foreign employers. The message is clear: surrender the poison or starve behind your walls. Inside the factories, panic erupts. British traders argue late into the night. "He's bluffing," one insists. "A few bribes and this crusader will bend like all the rest." Another shakes his head. "Not this one. They call him the Iron Commissioner. I hear he executed a dealer right outside the factories in plain sight." The room grows quiet. Everyone knows the stories are true. Lin is unlike any official they have faced before. Lin's resolve is not only practical but moral. In private writings he describes opium as a plague upon the nation, worse than invasion or famine. "He who brings poison to harm others," he writes, "deserves death 100 times. To him the trade is not simply illegal, it is a sin against heaven and humanity." This conviction gives him strength where others waver. He cannot be bought, cannot be distracted, cannot be intimidated. He sees his mission as divine. And yet Lin is not reckless. He is a strategist. He studies the foreign merchants carefully, gathering intelligence about their ships, their weapons, their trading patterns. He even composes a letter to Queen Victoria herself, appealing to her sense of justice. "In your honorable country, the smoking of opium is strictly forbidden. If it is not permitted in your own land, why should you allow it to be sold to harm another? How can you bear to profit from the misery of others?" The letter will never reach her, but its words reflect Lin's worldview. Morality and law must guide the empire's actions no matter the cost. The crackdown intensifies. Over 1,000 Chinese dealers are arrested. Tens of thousands of pipes are seized and destroyed. Addicts are forced into makeshift treatment centers where they writhe in withdrawal under the watchful eyes of soldiers. The city of Canton, long accustomed to indulgence, is thrown into turmoil. Some cheer the commissioner as a savior. Others curse him as a tyrant. But all understand one thing: the old order has ended. In tea houses, whispers spread. He has the emperor's full backing, one scholar says. Even the most corrupt officials cannot oppose him now. Another replies, perhaps he will succeed where others failed. Perhaps we will finally be free of this poison. But not everyone is convinced. A merchant shakes his head. The foreigners will never accept this. They will not surrender their fortunes without a fight. Mark my words, war will come. And so the city waits, tense and uncertain as Lin's ultimatum deadline approaches. Behind closed doors, foreign merchants count their losses, weighing surrender against defiance. In Beijing, the emperor receives glowing reports of Lin's progress, believing victory is near. And in Canton, the Iron Commissioner himself sits at his desk long into the night, brush in hand, writing orders and reading reports, his face lit by candlelight, his expression unyielding. He knows what others do not yet understand. The storm is only beginning. Lin Zexu has drawn a line in the sand. He has declared war not with armies, but with morality, with law, with unshakable resolve. But across the sea, in London, powerful men are already sharpening their arguments, demanding retaliation, framing their greed as national honor. The Iron Commissioner may have the will of heaven, but he is about to collide with the iron of the Industrial Revolution. The streets of Canton throbbed with tension in the spring of 1839. Word spread quickly. Commissioner Lin had drawn a hard line. No more indulgence, no more bribes, no more whispered arrangements in tea houses. The time of looking the other way was over. Troops in blue and red uniforms marched through the city, sealing off alleys known for dens. Soldiers raided storerooms where smugglers once operated openly. Addicts were dragged into the light, their pipes broken, their supplies burned in the street. Crowds gathered to watch, some cheering, others pale with fear. Never before had the Qing government moved with such ferocity. Inside the imperial yamen, Lin Zexu was relentless. Each day he read reports of arrests, seizures, and confessions. Each night he worked by candlelight, his brush scratching furiously as he issued orders. He had no patience for delay or half measures. Officials who hesitated were reprimanded. Soldiers who took bribes were punished on the spot. When one wealthy Chinese dealer was caught attempting to smuggle opium upriver, Lin had him paraded through the city in shackles before executing him outside the foreign factories. The message was unmistakable. No one was untouchable. Foreign merchants, long accustomed to manipulating local officials, were stunned. They had seen crackdowns before, always followed by quiet negotiations, discreet payments, and a return to business as usual. But Lin was different. He would not be bought. He could not be intimidated. His crackdown was not theater. It was war. The foreigners huddled inside their factories, debating furiously. Should they defy him and risk arrest? Should they bribe him and hope he was less incorruptible than he seemed? Or should they comply and surrender the opium stockpiled in their warehouses and aboard their receiving ships? Charles Elliot, the British superintendent of trade, urged caution. He knew Lin's reputation. He had seen the city ringed with troops, food and water cut off, Chinese servants forced to leave foreign employment. The siege was real, and the commissioner was prepared to starve the merchants out if necessary. Gentlemen, Elliot warned, this man is no ordinary mandarin. He has the emperor's full backing. If we resist, we risk not only our lives but our entire trade. But many merchants balked. To surrender their opium was to lose fortunes, millions of pounds sterling. Jardine, safely back in London, sent letters urging a hard stance. Others scoffed at Elliot's caution. The Chinese need our trade too much, they insisted. They cannot afford to drive us away. This is a bluff, nothing more. Lin did not bluff. As the deadline approached, his pressure intensified. Chinese laborers were forbidden to work for the foreigners. Water carriers were blocked at the gates. Guards turned away deliveries of rice and vegetables. Inside the factories, supplies dwindled. Tempers flared. Merchants argued deep into the night, their faces slick with sweat despite the spring air. Meanwhile, Lin turned his attention to the addicts themselves. Hundreds were rounded up and forced into improvised treatment centers. There, under guard, they endured agonizing withdrawal. The sounds of vomiting, moaning, and desperate cries echoed through the compounds. Some died. Many relapsed as soon as they were released. But Lin saw no alternative. To save the nation, he wrote, we must first break the chains of the people. The crackdown reached even the highest levels. Local officials known for corruption were suddenly brought before the commissioner's tribunal. Some were dismissed, others punished publicly. The shockwaves rippled across Canton. For once, the emperor's will was being carried out without compromise. Yet fear hung in the air. Merchants whispered of war. Ordinary citizens worried that foreign ships, anchored offshore, might unleash their cannons on the city. Mothers pulled children indoors at night as smuggling boats were seized on the river. In the markets, prices rose sharply. Silver was scarce. Rumors multiplied. Some said the foreigners were preparing to flee, others that they had secret weapons that could destroy the city in an instant. Inside the factories, the merchants finally broke. With no supplies and no servants, they were effectively prisoners. Charles Elliot made his fateful decision to order the surrender of all opium to the Chinese authorities, under the promise that the British Crown would later compensate the traders for their losses. Many merchants protested, shouting that Elliot had no authority to give away millions of pounds of private property. But others, worn down by weeks of siege, agreed. The handover began. Chest after chest of opium was delivered into Chinese custody under Lin's watchful eye. Over 20,000 in total, an enormous haul, unprecedented in history. But Lin was not satisfied with seizure alone. He made clear from the beginning that the opium would not be resold or hidden away. It would be destroyed. Publicly. Completely. And so, preparations began for the event that would stun the world. For the people of Canton, the crackdown was both terrifying and exhilarating. Some felt hope for the first time in years, daring to believe that perhaps the foreign poison could truly be eradicated. Others feared retaliation, whispering that Britain would never forgive such humiliation. In tea houses, voices argued late into the night. Lin Zexu is a hero, one insisted. He dares what no one else dared. Another replied darkly, a hero perhaps. But heroes often die first. Lin himself remained calm. He knew the risks. He knew the foreigners might respond with violence. But he also knew the empire could no longer afford half measures. To compromise now was to surrender the nation's dignity forever. Better to risk war than to embrace shame, he wrote. And so, Canton held its breath as the crackdown reached its climax. Thousands of chests of opium now sat in government warehouses, awaiting their fate. The foreigners seethed behind their walls, humiliated and enraged. The emperor in Beijing awaited news with pride and relief. And Commissioner Lin, the Iron Commissioner, prepared to carry out the greatest drug destruction in history. The spring air in Canton was heavy with anticipation. News spread like wildfire. Commissioner Lin was about to destroy the seized opium. Not hide it, not sell it, destroy it. Entire fortunes, millions of pounds sterling, would be reduced to nothing. At first, few believed it. Even the British merchants, humiliated by the surrender, assumed Lin would store the chests for later use. He'll resell it quietly, one muttered. No government destroys wealth on that scale. But they underestimated the Iron Commissioner's resolve. For Lin, this was not about profit. It was about principle. To cleanse the empire, the poison must be annihilated. The chosen site was human, a small village near the Pearl River's mouth. Workers labored under Lin's orders to dig enormous trenches lined with stone. Each trench could hold hundreds of chests. Salt and lime were prepared in great heaps nearby. Channels were dug to allow seawater to flow in and flush the poison away. On June 3, 1839, the work began. At dawn, under a blazing sun, the first chests were hauled to the site. Soldiers stood guard, their spears gleaming, while curious crowds gathered at a distance. British merchants watched from boats offshore, their faces grim. They had never imagined such a spectacle. One by one, the chests were opened. Inside lay the brown, sticky opium cakes, packed tightly and wrapped for shipment. Laborers smashed them open with clubs and shovels, dumping the contents into the trenches. Salt and lime were mixed in, releasing acrid fumes. Buckets of seawater were poured, dissolving the drug into a foul, bubbling slurry that flowed out toward the ocean. The smell was overpowering, sharp, bitter, nauseating. Some workers gagged, covering their noses with cloth. But Lin himself stood nearby, watching intently, his expression solemn but unwavering. He had ordered the destruction and would ensure it was carried out to the last chest. Not one tail must remain, he instructed. Not one pipeful must escape. For the British, the sight was unbearable. A merchant whispered hoarsely, "He's actually doing it. Millions just washed into the sea." Another, fists clenched, muttered, "This is robbery. An insult to His Majesty's subjects. London will not let this pass." But Lin did not flinch at their protests. His orders were absolute. The process was grueling. For 23 straight days, over 500 workers labored from dawn to dusk. Chests were smashed, contents destroyed, the cycle repeated again and again. Soldiers stood watch to prevent theft, while scribes carefully recorded the tally. By the end, 20,283 chests, about 1,300 tons of opium, had been destroyed, the largest drug bust in human history. Crowds gathered each day to watch. Some cheered, seeing justice at last. Others worried, whispering that Britain would surely retaliate. A fisherman told his son, pointing at the trenches, "Remember this, boy. You will not see such a thing again in your lifetime." The boy nodded, eyes wide, the acrid smoke burning his throat. Lin's determination extended beyond destruction. He sent a detailed report to the emperor in Beijing, describing every step of the process. He wanted no doubt, no rumor, no accusation of corruption. The poison was gone, utterly and completely. "We have struck at the root," he wrote proudly. "Let no one say the empire lacks resolve." But Lin also understood the danger. He knew the foreigners would not accept their loss quietly. He ordered coastal defenses strengthened, troops drilled, cannons repaired. Letters were sent warning governors to prepare for conflict. "They will seek revenge," he predicted. "Better we stand ready than be caught unprepared." In London, word of the destruction would soon ignite outrage, not at the merchants who had trafficked poison, but at the Chinese government for daring to destroy British property. But in that moment at Human, none of this mattered. What mattered was the sight of thousands of wooden chests shattered, their contents dissolved into the Pearl River, a defiant act of sovereignty in the face of foreign greed. For the people of Canton, the spectacle carried mixed emotions. Some felt pride that China had finally acted decisively. Others trembled at the thought of war. In tea houses, debates raged. "Lin Zexu is a hero," said one scholar. "He has defended the empire's dignity." "A hero, perhaps," another replied, "but he has awakened the dragon across the sea. Britain will not forgive this insult." Even Lin himself, though resolute, felt the weight of what he had unleashed. In his private writings he admitted, "I fear their ships, their fire, their iron. But I fear more the loss of our people's soul. If we allow poison for profit, what is left of the Middle Kingdom?" By the time the last chest was destroyed, Canton had changed. The air felt charged, uncertain, like the pause before a storm. The city's confidence, once eroded by addiction and corruption, flickered with new life. Yet beneath it lurked dread. Everyone knew the foreigners would not let the matter rest. The destruction at Human was not the end of the crisis. It was the spark. The act that transformed a moral crusade into an international conflict. The moment when the Iron Commissioner's resolve collided with the industrial might of Britain. As the final slurry of opium washed into the sea, Lin Zexu stood tall, his robes damp with sweat, his gaze unblinking. He had done what duty and morality demanded. The empire had struck back. But the waves lapping at the shore seemed to whisper a warning. Far to the west, across oceans, the response was already taking shape. And when it came, it would be fire and iron. News traveled slowly across the oceans in the 19th century, but when it finally reached London in late summer 1839, it exploded like a cannon shot. 20,000 chests of opium, British property, destroyed by order of a Qing commissioner. The merchants raged, the newspapers fumed, and Parliament bristled with indignation. The story spread quickly through the city. Millions of pounds worth of goods seized, humiliated traders confined in their factories, treated like criminals by a barbarian empire. To the British public, the details were simplified and reframed. This was not about opium, it was about national honor, free trade, and the protection of British subjects abroad. At the clubs of St. James, merchants demanded retribution. "This Lin fellow has made a mockery of us," one shipping magnate barked. "If we let it stand, every petty tyrant in Asia will think he can trample British commerce." In coffeehouses and pubs, the mood was no different. The outrage was less about the destruction of drugs and more about the insult to Britain's prestige. The merchants of the East India Company, many of whom had grown wealthy on the China trade, lobbied furiously. Men like William Jardine, safely back in London after leaving Canton just before Lin's crackdown, pressed their case with skill and persistence. He reminded Parliament that the opium trade supported not just merchants, but also British India, where revenue from poppy cultivation financed colonial administration. To jeopardize that trade, he argued, was to threaten the empire itself. In the House of Commons, debate turned fierce. Some condemned the opium merchants outright. "Are we to fight a war to defend smugglers?" one MP asked. "Is it Britain's duty to spread vice across the world?" But their voices were drowned out by the thunder of those who demanded action. "This is not about opium," declared Lord Palmerston, the Foreign Secretary. "It is about free trade. It is about the protection of British lives and property. The Chinese must be taught that they cannot injure British subjects with impunity." Palmerston's words set the tone. To the British government, Lin's destruction of opium was not a moral triumph but an intolerable affront. It was painted as an act of lawless tyranny against British merchants conducting legitimate trade. Never mind that the very same drug was outlawed in Britain itself. Hypocrisy was buried beneath patriotism. The press fueled the fire. Editorials denounced the Qing as arrogant despots, blind to modern progress, cruel to their people and disrespectful to Britain. Cartoons depicted the Chinese as backward mandarins puffing smoke while British ships waited to bring civilization to their shores. The narrative was carefully constructed. Britain was not defending opium, it was defending civilization, commerce, and national pride. Behind the rhetoric lay cold calculation. The British Navy was the most powerful in the world. Its steamships, iron hulls, and explosive shells represented the cutting edge of the Industrial Revolution. Against them, the wooden junks and outdated muskets of the Qing stood little chance. To Palmerston and others, the risk was minimal. The reward, forcing China to open its markets, was immense. The cabinet made its decision. An expeditionary force would be dispatched to the South China Sea. Officially, its mission was to protect British lives and secure fair treatment for merchants. Unofficially, its task was to punish China for daring to resist and to compel the Qing to accept British trade on British terms, opium included. In the shipyards along the Thames, preparations began. Cannons were polished, powder loaded, ships provisioned. The fleet would consist of more than a dozen warships, including armed steamers capable of navigating China's shallow rivers. Soldiers drilled in Portsmouth, preparing for a campaign thousands of miles away. The operation would be costly, but the government was confident the profits of victory would repay the investment many times over. Back in Canton, the foreign community watched anxiously. News of Parliament's decision had not yet arrived, but they sensed it was coming. Letters and dispatches spoke of growing anger in London. "The barbarians will return," muttered a Chinese merchant in a tea house. "They will come with fire and iron." A British trader overheard him and replied coldly, "Yes. And when they come, this city will learn what British steel means." Commissioner Lin remained defiant. He continued his crackdown, arresting dealers, forcing addicts into treatment, and strengthening coastal defenses. But deep down, even he sensed the storm gathering beyond the horizon. He had written to Queen Victoria herself, appealing to morality, but received no reply. He had destroyed the opium to protect his country, but instead of relief, he had provoked an empire. By the end of 1839, British warships were already sailing east. Sailors sang shanties on deck, officers studied maps of the Chinese coast, and cargo holds brimmed with supplies for a long campaign. The men knew little of China beyond what they had been told, that it was rich, arrogant, and ripe for humiliation. Few doubted the outcome. In London, victory was considered inevitable. "It will be a short campaign," one MP predicted confidently. "A lesson taught in weeks, not months. The Chinese will bow, as all others have before the might of the Royal Navy." The chamber rang with approval. No one imagined the conflict would drag on for years, reshaping the balance of power in Asia and altering the course of Chinese history forever. As winter settled over Britain, the fury of its government and merchants hardened into resolve. The expedition was underway. Across the seas, Commissioner Lin and the people of Canton carried on their daily lives, unaware of the armada bearing down upon them. The destruction at Human had been a moral victory for China. But in London, it was seen as a provocation that could not go unanswered. The clash of principle and profit, morality and might, was now inevitable. The storm that Lin feared was no longer a distant threat. It was already on the water, carried by sails and steam, by iron and ambition. And soon, it would break upon China's shores. June 1840. Dawn breaks over the quiet fishing village of Dinghai on Zhoushan Island. Fishermen rise with the sun, expecting another ordinary day at sea. But when they step from their huts, they stop in their tracks. On the horizon, monstrous silhouettes loom against the morning light. 24 British ships, bristling with cannon, advancing like a steel tide. 16 warships, 4 steamers, 4 supply vessels. Black smoke billows from the funnels of steam-powered frigates, their engines churning steadily against the current. The villagers gape in silence. They have never seen ships that move without sails, never imagined vessels clad in iron, never dreamed of cannon that can fire explosive shells across miles. One fisherman drops his oar. "Devil ships," he whispers. The Chinese coastal defenders are equally stunned. Soldiers clutch their spears and matchlock muskets, their training rooted in tradition centuries old. Their commander, a stern bannerman in lacquered armor, rallies them to the fort walls. "Stand firm," he shouts, though his own hands tremble. He has his orders: no compromise, no surrender. Commissioner Lin's edicts are clear. The Empire must resist. From the deck of HMS Wellesley, the British commander issues his demand: surrender the port or face bombardment. The Chinese refuse. Pride and duty leave them no choice. At noon, the order is given. British cannon roar. The sound is unlike anything the defenders have ever heard. Not the deep thud of solid shot, but the shriek of explosive shells, hollow iron projectiles that detonate on impact. The first shells smash into the fort, stone and flesh shattered in equal measure. "They can't reach us from that distance," a Chinese officer begins to say, moments before a shell explodes below him, leaving only smoke and fragments where he once stood. The defenders fire their cannon in reply, but their iron balls bounce harmlessly off British hulls or fall short in the sea. The bombardment continues for hours. Walls crumble, gun emplacements collapse, soldiers scatter in terror. By evening, British Marines land unopposed. Dinghai falls with barely a fight. To the stunned villagers watching from the hills, it seems impossible. How could the barbarians defeat the forces of the Celestial Empire so easily? The truth is brutal. The empire that once humbled the Mongols and kept foreign kings at bay is centuries behind in military technology. Its soldiers fight with valor but outdated weapons. Its commanders cling to old tactics while their enemies wage war with the tools of the Industrial Revolution. The dragon, proud but stagnant, has met the lion forged in fire and steel. News of the defeat travels north. In Beijing's Forbidden City, the Daoguang Emperor receives the report with disbelief. "How can a small island of barbarians challenge the might of China?" he demands. "We outnumber them 100 to 1. A brave official speaks cautiously, "Your Majesty, their weapons are different. Our soldiers fight with swords and spears. The barbarians bring fire-breathing machines and iron ships." The emperor's face darkens. To admit weakness is to risk treason. The court murmurs in fearful silence. Back on the coast, the British advance methodically. Their strategy is simple: use naval superiority to bombard from a safe distance, then land troops once resistance is broken. City after city falls. At Kowloon, the Chinese fleet of wooden junks sails bravely into battle. Among them, you stand as a translator, hearing sailors mutter prayers as the British steamer HMS Nemesis approaches. The Nemesis is unlike anything they've seen, an iron-hulled, steam-powered warship built specifically for shallow Chinese waters. Armed with 32-pounder guns and Congreve rockets, it belches black smoke as it glides directly against the wind. "It's a fire demon," whispers the Chinese captain. "How can men fight such a thing?" The battle lasts less than an hour. Chinese cannonballs bounce harmlessly off the Nemesis. British rockets scream across the sky, exploding among the tightly packed junks. One ship's powder magazine ignites, tearing it apart in a thunderous blast. Another catches fire, burning to the waterline as sailors leap overboard. only to drown in heavy armor. The fleet is shattered. The nemesis is untouched. The scale of the mismatch becomes undeniable. To many Chinese observers, it feels as if the laws of nature themselves have shifted. How can wooden walls and human courage withstand thunder that falls from the sky, iron that floats against the wind? For centuries, China believed itself the center of civilization, the Middle Kingdom destined to rule all under heaven. Now that worldview cracks beneath the weight of British firepower. By January 1841, the British blockade the Pearl River, cutting off Canton from the sea. Panic spreads among merchants and peasants alike. In the city, Commissioner Lin's earlier triumph, the destruction of the opium, now feels hollow. He is blamed for provoking the wrath of Britain. The emperor, seeking a scapegoat, dismisses Lin from his post and sends him into exile. He was too harsh, courtiers whisper. His arrogance brought disaster upon us. Few dare admit that the disaster lies not in Lin's actions but in centuries of stagnation and complacency. For the British, victories come easily, almost too easily. Their casualties are light, most deaths caused by disease rather than combat. Confidence grows. In letters home, officers describe the war as little more than target practice. The Chinese, one writes, fight bravely but hopelessly. They are armed for the last century, not this one. Yet amid their triumph, even some British observers feel unease. Watching the devastation of a coastal city, an officer admits in his journal, "This is no war of equals. It is slaughter." Still, the campaign continues. Canton, Amoy, Ningpo, all fall in succession. The dragon reels, its scales shattered by fire and iron. The lion roars across the coast, certain of ultimate victory. The First Opium War has truly begun. And though the outcome seems certain, its consequences, for China, for Britain, for the world, will be far greater than either side yet imagines. May 1841. The Pearl River lies heavy under a humid sky. Along its banks, the city of Canton, China's great trading hub, the jewel of the South, waits in dread silence. Rumors swirl through its tea houses and marketplaces. The British fleet is approaching. For centuries, Canton was a fortress of wealth. Its merchants grew rich on silk, porcelain, and tea. Its foreign factories bustled with trade, carefully regulated by the Qing. But now, the very heart of that system is under threat. The dragon's greatest port faces the lion's guns. The British plan is ruthless in its simplicity. Warships will bombard coastal defenses from afar, then Marines will land to press the attack. Superior firepower will do the rest. On the morning of May 21st, their ships move into position, their sails furled, their cannons gleaming in the light. On the walls of Canton, Qing soldiers clutch spears and matchlock muskets, praying to the ancestors for strength. The bombardment begins. The first thunderous volley shakes the city to its foundations. Cannonballs whistle overhead, smashing into ramparts, exploding powder stores, shattering walls. Smoke and dust fill the air. Women clutch children, rushing to underground cellars. Merchants abandon shops, fleeing through narrow alleys. Inside the yamen, officials panic. Some argue for resistance. Others urge surrender, fearing the city will be reduced to rubble. "If we fight, the losses will be unbearable," one cries. "If we yield, we lose the emperor's face," counters another. Torn between fear and duty, they hesitate. Meanwhile, the British Marines land. Red-coated soldiers move with grim efficiency, advancing behind cover of naval fire. The Qing defenders fight bravely but are hopelessly outgunned. Arrows and musket balls scatter against disciplined volleys of British rifles. Chinese cannon thunder once, twice, then fall silent as their gunners are cut down. By midday, the outcome is clear. Canton, once defended by thousands, is at the mercy of the invaders. Smoke curls from shattered gates. The sound of boots and drums echoes through the city's outer districts. The pride of the empire lies open. But then, something unexpected happens. The British halt. They do not storm the city center, do not sack its temples or markets. Instead, they send a message to the local authorities: ransom. 6 million silver dollars they demand in exchange for sparing Canton from destruction. The officials reel at the sum. $6 million, an astronomical fortune equal to the annual revenue of entire provinces. Yet the choice is stark: pay or see Canton burned. The Governor-General swallows his pride. He agrees. The negotiation is conducted in tense silence. Silver ingots are brought from provincial treasuries, loaded onto carts under armed escort. In the marketplaces, whispers spread, "Our city has been bought like merchandise." Some citizens curse the Qing court for weakness. Others breathe relief that their homes will not be reduced to ashes. For the British, the ransom is victory enough. Canton's fate proves that China's great cities can be taken, or spared, at foreign whim. The message is clear. Resistance means ruin, cooperation means survival. It is not just a military triumph, but a psychological one. In the tea houses, the conversations are bitter. "Where are our mighty armies?" asks a merchant, staring into his cup. "Where are the bannermen who swore to protect us?" An old veteran answers quietly, "Our soldiers fight with honor, but the enemy fights with thunder and fire. How can flesh stand against iron?" Commissioner Lin, already dismissed by imperial decree, is far away when Canton pays its ransom. Yet many still blame him. "He destroyed the opium," sneer his critics, "but invited disaster upon us." Few admit the deeper truth. The disaster was centuries in the making. Lin only forced the empire to confront it. As British ships withdraw from Canton, silver heavy in their holds, the city exhales an uneasy relief. Temples still stand, shops reopen, the rhythms of life return. But something fundamental has changed. Canton is no longer invincible. His people no longer believe the empire can protect them. Far away in Beijing, the emperor receives word of the ransom. His face darkens. To pay barbarians is humiliation enough. To pay them with silver stripped from his people is worse. Yet he has little choice. The treasury is weak, the army weaker still. He clings to the belief that this storm will pass, that China's greatness will endure. But even in the Forbidden City, whispers spread. The dynasty's mandate of heaven feels less secure with each passing day. For the British, Canton's fall confirms their confidence. Officers boast in letters home, "We spared them, though we could have destroyed the place. Let them remember it was mercy, not weakness." In London, merchants celebrate, convinced that greater victories lie ahead. But beneath the surface, unease lingers. Some recognize the imbalance too clearly. "This is no war of equals," writes one naval officer in his journal. "It is the beating of an old man by a younger, stronger foe. I wonder what history will say of us." In Canton, meanwhile, the people carry on. The markets bustle again, but silver coins are scarcer, prices higher. Families whisper of taxes to come, of debts to pay, of futures mortgaged to ransom their city. The scars of humiliation may not be visible on the walls, but they cut deep into the soul. The fall of Canton is not measured in lives lost or buildings burned. It is measured in pride surrendered, in silver drained, in faith broken. The heart of the South has learned a bitter truth. The Middle Kingdom is no longer the master of its fate. And as the British fleet sails northward, seeking new prizes along the coast, Canton's reprieve feels less like salvation and more like a warning. The dragon bleeds. The lion is not finished. Summer 1841. The waters of the South China Sea glisten beneath the sun as the British fleet pulls away from Canton. Their holds are heavy with silver ransom, their officers smug with victory. But they are not finished. Canton was only the beginning. Now the war will spread north along China's coast, each new city a target, each new victory another nail in the coffin of Qing resistance. The next strike is Amoy, a bustling port in Fujian province. Known for its merchants and shipyards, Amoy has long been a gateway for trade to the southern seas. Its defenses seem formidable, forts bristling with cannon, soldiers lining the walls. But when the British warships appear offshore in August 1841, the defenders stare in disbelief. The ships float like iron mountains, their guns gleaming in the sunlight. At the center looms the nemesis, the demon ship whose name has already spread in fearful whispers across the coast. The bombardment begins at dawn. Explosive shells arc through the sky, tearing into walls, collapsing towers, scattering defenders in panic. Chinese cannon answer, but their solid shot bounces harmlessly off British hulls or splashes into the sea. The outcome is never in doubt. By afternoon, British Marines storm ashore. The defenders fight bravely, swords clashing against bayonets, but courage cannot bridge centuries of technology. Amoy falls within a day. To the British officers, it is almost routine. One writes in his log, "The forts were strong but the gunners unskilled. Their resistance collapsed after our first broadside. It was scarcely a battle." Yet to the people of Amoy, the defeat is shattering. Families flee inland, abandoning shops and homes. Smoke rises over the harbor as British troops secure their new prize. From Amoy, the fleet sails north again, striking Ningpo in Zhejiang province. Ningpo is larger, wealthier, its streets lined with temples and merchants' mansions. But it too lies vulnerable. In October 1841, the British arrive. Once again, cannons thunder. Once again, walls crumble. Once again, the defenders are swept aside. By evening, British flags fly above the city gates. Ningpo's capture marks a turning point. For the first time, foreign troops occupy a major Chinese city, not just its ports or fortresses. Officers march through streets once thought sacred to the Middle Kingdom, their boots echoing on cobblestones as stunned residents watch from shuttered doorways. To the British, Ningpo is a triumph. To the Chinese, it is humiliation beyond words. Winter brings no respite. In early 1842, the British advance deeper into the empire. Their ships sail up the Yangtze River, the great waterway of China, the artery that feeds its heartland. This is unprecedented. No foreign fleet has ever penetrated so far inland. Villagers along the riverbanks watch in horror as iron warships belching smoke glide past their rice fields. It is as if dragons of fire have come from the sea, one farmer mutters. At each stop, the pattern repeats: bombardment, collapse, surrender. The speed and scale of the advance shocks even seasoned observers. The Chinese fight with bravery, notes a British officer, but bravery is useless against shells and rockets. Entire towns surrender without firing a shot, their officials desperate to spare their people the fate of Amoy and Ningpo. By June 1842, the fleet has reached Zhenjiang, a key city guarding the entrance to the Grand Canal. Here, resistance is stronger. Thousands of Qing troops man the walls, determined to hold the line. 4 hours they fight ferociously, muskets cracking, arrows hissing, cannons booming. But the British fire is relentless. Explosive shells smash through gates, rockets ignite powder stores, flames consume wooden defenses. The city falls, leaving thousands of Chinese dead. British casualties number only a few dozen. The fall of Zhenjiang is catastrophic for Qing's strategy. With the Grand Canal cut, the lifeline of grain shipments to Beijing is severed. The capital itself trembles. If the British sail further north, nothing will stand between them and Nanjing, the southern capital of the Ming dynasty and still one of China's most important cities. The war is no longer confined to distant provinces, it is at the empire's very heart. In Beijing, the Daoguang emperor paces his palace in despair. Reports of defeat pile high on his desk. Amoy lost, Ningpo occupied, Zhenjiang fallen. He lashes out at his ministers, demanding explanations, demanding miracles. But none can be given. His armies are outdated, his navy shattered, his coffers drained. Even the bannermen, once the pride of the dynasty, have proven powerless. Meanwhile, British morale soars. Letters home describe the campaign almost as a procession rather than a war. The Chinese cannot withstand us, writes one officer. Each victory comes swifter than the last. Soon, we shall dictate terms at the gates of their own capital. In London, merchants and politicians grow giddy with anticipation. China's markets will be forced open, its treasures laid bare. But among ordinary Chinese, despair deepens. In the tea houses of Ningpo, men speak in hushed tones. The barbarians march through our streets as if they own them, one says bitterly. Where is the Son of Heaven? Where is the mandate he claims? A scholar replies softly, perhaps heaven has turned its face away. The war that began with opium has now become something greater, a test of civilizations. The Qing fight not only for territory but for the very belief that China remains the Middle Kingdom, the axis of the world. Each defeat erodes that belief further. Each British victory is a crack in the empire's illusion of invincibility. By the summer of 1842, the British fleet anchors before Nanjing itself. The great river city, jewel of the Yangtze, lies exposed. Behind its walls, officials and generals debate their options. Fight and risk annihilation? Or surrender and accept humiliation? For the empire, the question is no longer whether it can win. It is whether it can survive at all. August 1842. The heat along the Yangtze is suffocating. Locusts buzz in the rice fields as British warships anchor before the great city of Nanjing. Once the proud capital of the Ming dynasty, Nanjing now trembles beneath foreign guns. From the walls, Qing soldiers peer nervously at the fleet below. They have seen what happened at Amoy, Ningpo, Zhenjiang. They have heard the thunder of British cannon and the screams of their comrades torn apart by shells. They know what the black smoke means. And they know their city could be next. Inside the walls, panic spreads. Officials crowd into the Governor-General's mansion, voices raised in desperate debate. "We must fight," one insists. "The honor of the dynasty demands it." Another counters, pale-faced, "To fight is suicide. Our weapons are useless against their fire demons. If we resist, Nanjing will burn as Zhenjiang burned." At last, a grim consensus emerges. They will sue for peace. For the first time in living memory, the Middle Kingdom will beg terms from barbarians. Messengers ride in haste to Beijing. In the Forbidden City, the Daoguang Emperor receives the news with heavy silence. He has tried denial, anger, scapegoating. None of it has changed the battlefield. His armies are shattered, his treasury bled dry, his mandate questioned. Now he faces a choice: make peace or risk the march of foreign troops toward Beijing itself. He chooses peace. Envoys are appointed, men of rank but little leverage. They depart with heads bowed, aware they carry the humiliation of an empire on their shoulders. On August 29, 1842, the Qing delegation boards the HMS Cornwallis, a British warship anchored off Nanjing. The symbolism is deliberate. The negotiations will take place not in a palace or neutral hall, but on the deck of a foreign vessel. China is not dictating terms, it is receiving them. The contrast between the two delegations could not be sharper. The British arrive confident, well-fed, uniforms crisp, their manner casual. They know they hold every card. The Chinese arrive solemn, robed in silk but faces ashen, their dignity a thin mask over despair. They bow stiffly, knowing they have little to offer but compliance. Sir Henry Pottinger, Britain's plenipotentiary, reads the terms aloud. They are not negotiations but demands. Indemnity: China will pay 21 million silver dollars to cover the cost of the war and compensation for the destroyed opium. Territory: the island of Hong Kong will be ceded, in perpetuity, to Britain, a foreign power's first permanent foothold on Chinese soil. Trade: 5 ports, Canton, Amoy, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai, will be open to British trade, with the right for merchants to reside there. Law: British citizens in these ports will be subject not to Chinese law but to their own consular courts, a concept called extraterritoriality. Most favored nation clause: any privilege granted to another foreign power will automatically extend to Britain. The Chinese officials listen in silence, each clause a dagger. When the document is brought forward for their seals, one delegate turns away, tears streaming down his face. 2,000 years of history, he whispers, and we are the ones who sign away the emperor's sovereignty. On deck, British officers toast with wine. A most satisfactory conclusion, Pottinger declares. Britain and China can now look forward to peaceful and mutually beneficial trade. His words ring hollow to the Chinese envoys, who know they are returning not with peace but with humiliation. Back in Nanjing, word of the treaty spreads quickly. Merchants hope trade will resume. Soldiers curse their leaders for surrender. Scholars lament the loss of dignity. Ordinary citizens wonder what it means for their lives. "We have lost the mandate of heaven," mutters an old teacher to his pupils. "The barbarians dictate terms from iron ships, and our Son of Heaven bows to their will." In London, the treaty is hailed as a triumph. Newspapers proclaim it the dawn of a new era in Asia. Merchants celebrate the opening of Shanghai, predicting it will become a jewel of British trade. Few mention opium. Officially, the war was never about drugs but about free commerce and national honor. The hypocrisy is complete. For China, the Treaty of Nanjing is more than a defeat. It is a rupture in its worldview. For centuries, China saw itself as the Middle Kingdom, the center of civilization, with foreign states as tributaries. Now it has signed a treaty with foreigners as equals, worse, as superiors. The Son of Heaven is no longer master of all under heaven. As the British fleet sails away, silver in its holds and Hong Kong in its possession, the dynasty is left to reckon with the consequences. The indemnity will drain the treasury. The ports will bring foreign merchants and missionaries into China's heart. The extraterritorial clauses will create enclaves where Qing authority cannot reach. And the opium trade, though never mentioned, will only expand under this new arrangement. In tea houses across the empire, conversations take on a bitter tone. "We have been carved like a melon," says one merchant. "First Britain, then others will come." His companion nods grimly. "Yes, the barbarians have tasted our weakness. They will not stop." The Treaty of Nanjing ends the First Opium War. But it begins something darker. A century of unequal treaties, foreign concessions, and national humiliation. China's long decline has entered a new, irreversible phase. On the deck of the Cornwallis, as the ink dries on the treaty, a British officer looks across the river at Nanjing's ancient walls. "They believe this is the end," he says quietly. "They do not see that it is only the beginning." The guns of the First Opium War fall silent in 1842, but the silence is uneasy. The Treaty of Nanjing has been signed, and with it, China enters a new and painful chapter. The battlefield smoke may have cleared, but the wounds run deeper than any cannon could inflict. The first burden is silver. $21 million, an astronomical indemnity, must be paid to Britain. To meet the obligation, the Qing strip provincial treasuries, impose new taxes, and squeeze peasants already living at the edge of survival. Carts of silver ingots rumble through city streets on their way to British ships. Citizens watch in grim silence, their wealth drained coin by coin. "We fought and lost," mutters one merchant, "and now the people must pay the price." The second burden is territory. In January 1843, the Union Jack rises over Hong Kong Island. To Qing officials, the rocky outcrop seems worthless. Barren hills, scattered fishing villages, hardly a place of significance. But the British see what the Chinese do not. Its deep-water harbor is perfect for naval power and trade. Mark my words, a British merchant boasts, watching the flag unfurl. "In 50 years this island will be the jewel of the Orient." He is not wrong. The third burden is trade. 5 ports, Canton, Amoy, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai, are thrown open to foreign merchants. In these enclaves, the balance of power shifts overnight. Union Jacks flutter over imposing stone warehouses. Foreign consuls establish courts that place their citizens above Chinese law. Extraterritoriality becomes more than a legal term, it becomes a daily humiliation. If a British sailor kills a Chinese porter in Shanghai, he faces trial not in a Chinese court, but in a consular one, often with little more than a fine. "They are untouchable," a Chinese shopkeeper says bitterly. "We are strangers in our own land." Shanghai, in particular, transforms with dizzying speed. Where once stood wooden houses and narrow alleys, European-style banks, hotels, and clubs rise along the Bund. Signs in English and French dominate the waterfront. Foreign police patrol wide streets lit with gas lamps, while just across the boundary, the Chinese city remains crowded and poor, its alleys dark and fetid. The division is stark, two worlds existing side by side, yet utterly unequal. Meanwhile, missionaries arrive under the protection of the new treaties. They preach in villages and towns, their presence tolerated by treaty obligations but resented by many locals. Some genuinely seek to help, offering schools and medical care. Others seem to embody foreign intrusion, dismissing Chinese traditions as superstition. Conflicts erupt, sometimes violent, further eroding trust between the people and their rulers. The most bitter irony is that the treaty never mentions the word opium. Officially, the war was fought for free trade, not for drugs. But in practice, the trade flourishes like never before. Smugglers no longer slip through the shadows. Ships unload openly at treaty ports, their cargoes protected by British gunboats and the threat of renewed war. In 1839, before Lin Zex's crackdown, roughly 40,000 chests of opium entered China annually. By 1850, that number nearly doubles. By 1858, it will exceed 70,000. In Canton, opium dens multiply. Men lie wasted on bamboo platforms, their families destitute. A customs official watching crates being carried into a warehouse under foreign guard sighs, "We fought to stop this poison, and now it spreads more openly than ever. We lost men, silver, and honor, and for what?" In Beijing, the emperor rages at the humiliation but remains trapped. His advisors argue bitterly. Some demand reform, urging the empire to adopt Western technology to resist further encroachment. Others cling to tradition, warning that foreign ways would corrupt the Confucian order. Paralysis grips the court. Edicts are issued but rarely enforced. The dynasty, once the center of the world, now stumbles in uncertainty. Among the people, anger simmers. Secret societies gain new followers, fueled by resentment of foreigners and distrust of the Qing. Farmers, crushed by taxes, mutter that the dynasty has lost the mandate of heaven. Scholars debate in dim-lit halls, asking if China can survive by clinging to its past, or if it must embrace the future, even if that future comes wrapped in Western steel. For the British, the outcome is celebrated as a triumph. Merchants toast to new fortunes. Politicians praise the success of the Royal Navy. Newspapers proclaim the opening of China as a victory for civilization and progress. Few mention the moral cost. Few question what it means to profit from addiction and humiliation. Yet even some British officers feel unease. Watching carts of silver roll through treaty ports, one writes in his diary, "We have beaten them into submission, but at what price? This is not victory, it is exploitation. One day perhaps they will rise again, and we shall reap what we sow." For now, though, the reality is grim. China is shackled not by armies in its streets but by ink on a treaty. Its sovereignty eroded, its economy distorted, its pride shattered. The unequal peace is worse than war, for it lingers in every transaction, every insult, every flag flying over foreign concessions. The Treaty of Nanjing was meant to end a conflict. Instead, it opens the door to decades of humiliation. And as the smoke of battle fades, a darker storm gathers. Rebellions at home, demands from abroad, and the relentless spread of the poison that began it all. The Treaty of Nanjing may have ended the war, but it does not end the poison. In fact, it ensures the opposite. The moment foreign ships are allowed to dock openly at the treaty ports, opium flows in with a force greater than ever before. What once slipped in under cover of night now arrives in broad daylight, escorted by gunboats and stamped with the authority of free trade. In Canton, crates of opium are unloaded openly at the docks. Dockworkers no longer whisper nervously as they haul the heavy chests. They laugh, smoke, and count the coins that come faster than rice harvests ever could. A customs inspector stands nearby, powerless, watching cart after cart roll away. "We are officials of an empire," he mutters bitterly to his aide, "yet here we stand as clerks for foreign merchants." The numbers tell the story. In 1839, before Lin Zex's crackdown, about 40,000 chests of opium were smuggled into China annually. By 1850, barely a decade later, imports nearly double. By 1858, the figure reaches more than 70,000 chests, roughly 4,500 tons of opium flooding the country each year. The market is not shrinking under imperial bans, it is exploding under imperial weakness. The effects ripple through society. In coastal cities like Canton, Shanghai, and Ningbo, opium dens multiply. Once hidden in back alleys, they now sit brazenly on busy streets. Wealthy officials recline on embroidered couches, pipes in hand. Laborers crowd into dim rooms where bamboo mats are stained with sweat and ash. The air is thick with sweet, acrid smoke. You step into one such den in Shanghai. The scene is haunting. Men stretched out on wooden platforms, their faces pale, their bodies wasted. Some drift in and out of consciousness. Others stare blankly at nothing, lost in dreams. A gaunt operator explains with a shrug. They were dock workers once. Good pay, strong men. Now they work just enough to buy their pipe each day. He points to an emaciated figure in the corner. That one sold his daughter last week. 8 years old, gone for a month's worth of smoke. The poison does not spare the powerful. Imperial officials themselves are often addicts. Magistrates who once swore to uphold the law now pay smugglers for their nightly escape. Soldiers, meant to defend the empire, fall into dependency, their strength wasted. An old saying emerges, the barbarians brought the poison, but our own people fed it to us. The economy twists around the drug. Peasants sell rice, tea, even family heirlooms to buy opium. Some abandon farming altogether, turning fields into poppy plots to feed demand. Silver drains from the country faster than ever. Provincial treasuries, stripped to pay war indemnities, now see what little revenue they have vanish into foreign merchants' coffers. Officials write desperate reports to Beijing. Tax revenues decline as addiction spreads. Families collapse. Banditry rises. The empire weakens. But in the Forbidden City, debates circle endlessly. Should China embrace Western technology to fight back, or cling to Confucian traditions? Should it legalize opium to tax it, or fight against it even at the risk of more humiliation? The emperor issues edicts against the drug, but local officials, often addicts themselves, ignore them. Reformers plead for modernization, but conservatives resist, fearful that foreign methods will corrode the social order. The result is paralysis. Meanwhile, Western merchants grow rich. They justify themselves with familiar arguments. "We did not force them to smoke," says one British trader over brandy in a Canton club. "It is their choice." His companion nods. "We provide supply, they provide demand. That is trade." Yet both men know that in their own homeland, opium is tightly regulated as medicine, never tolerated for recreation. The hypocrisy is stunning, but profit outweighs conscience. Not all foreigners are blind. A British missionary in Ningbo writes home, "I see with my own eyes the devastation this drug causes. Husbands abandon wives, fathers sell children, whole villages are reduced to despair. How can Christian men profit from such misery?" His letter is ignored. Among the Chinese, resentment boils. Secret societies whisper that the dynasty has lost the mandate of heaven. Farmers, pressed by new taxes, curse both foreign devils and corrupt officials. Some turn to rebellion, others to banditry. The seeds of unrest are sown in the soil of humiliation, and still the poison spreads. By the mid-1840s, Shanghai's foreign concessions flourish. The Bund is lined with new banks, warehouses, and consulates. The city pulses with foreign wealth while, across the dividing line, Chinese alleys sink into poverty and addiction. A Chinese scholar, standing on the waterfront, shakes his head as he watches crates of opium roll past. "This is not peace," he says. "It is decay." The war has ended, but the conquest continues, in smoke. The Treaty of Nanjing had promised stability. Instead, it has entrenched weakness. China's sovereignty has been eroded, its society poisoned, its economy drained. And the poison that began in foreign fields has now seeped so deeply into the Middle Kingdom that no edict, no decree, seems able to stop it. The war may be over, but the true battle, the struggle for China's soul, has only just begun. By the late 1840s, the opium crisis is no longer confined to treaty ports and foreign concessions. It has seeped into the countryside, into villages where foreign merchants have never set foot. What began as smuggling on the Pearl River has grown into a nationwide epidemic. The smoke of the poppy drifts into temples, markets, barracks, even classrooms. And where the smoke spreads, unrest follows. In Guangxi province, a rugged land of mountains and rice paddies, discontent simmers. Farmers burdened by taxes sell their crops just to pay officials who in turn spend the silver on opium. Bandits roam the hills, preying on caravans weakened by corruption. A young scholar, Hong Xiuquan, walks among these people. He has failed the imperial examinations 4 times, a crushing blow in a society where scholarly success is the path to honor. In his despair, Hong suffers visions that convince him he is the younger brother of Jesus Christ, sent to purify China of both Manchu corruption and foreign poison. At first, few take him seriously. But as addiction spreads and poverty deepens, his message resonates. He promises a heavenly kingdom of great peace, free of opium, free of foreign domination, free of the hated Manchu rulers. Villagers, desperate for hope, flock to his cause. The smoke that clouds their homes has also ignited a rebellion that will shake the empire to its foundations. By 1850, Hong's followers number in the thousands. They march under banners proclaiming salvation from sin and freedom from opium. The foreigners brought poison, Hong declares to his growing army, but it is the Manchus who allowed it to spread. Both must be cast out. His words fall like sparks on dry kindling. Within a year, the Taiping rebellion erupts. The rebellion spreads rapidly, fueled by desperation. Farmers whose fields can no longer feed them, soldiers unpaid because silver has drained away, women widowed by addiction, all rally to Hong's vision. Towns and villages fall under Taiping control. In each new settlement, opium pipes are smashed, dens are burned, and addicts are forced into brutal cleansing rituals. For some, this is salvation. For others, it is simply another form of suffering. You travel with a merchant caravan passing through Guangxi. At a roadside inn, you hear whispers of a new kingdom rising. They say Hong Xiuquan's men destroyed every opium pipe in Wuzhou, one trader tells you. Good riddance, replies another, but they also killed the magistrate and his family. Fear and hope intertwine in every voice. Meanwhile, the imperial court in Beijing struggles to understand the scale of what is happening. Reports of rebellion mingle with reports of continued silver drain, corruption, and foreign arrogance. Some officials blame the foreigners, others blame the dynasty's own failures. Few recognize that opium is the common thread tying it all together, the poison that has weakened soldiers, bankrupted treasuries, and enraged the people. But the Taipings are not the only rebels rising in the smoke. In the north, the Nian rebellion spreads among impoverished peasants. In the southwest, Muslim communities revolt against both local oppression and imperial neglect. Secret societies, long suppressed, flourish once more, recruiting among those who see no future in a system corrupted by addiction. The opium crisis has fractured China from within. Once, the empire's greatest strength was its unity, its belief that the emperor ruled all under heaven with the mandate of heaven. Now that unity is broken. To many Chinese, the Qing dynasty no longer looks like the son of heaven's chosen vessel. It looks like a dynasty addicted, humiliated, and powerless. Western observers take note. A French missionary writes in 1851, "I see clearly now that opium is not just a drug. It is a weapon. It has made the strong weak, the proud humble, the united divided. It has prepared the soil for rebellion." British merchants, meanwhile, worry less about rebellion than about trade. So long as the silver keeps flowing, one notes dryly, let the Chinese fight among themselves. The human cost of these rebellions is staggering. Villages burned, families torn apart, millions displaced. In Guangxi, you meet a refugee family huddled under a makeshift shelter. The father, once a farmer, now coughs violently, too weak to work. The mother clutches two children, their faces gaunt. "Our land is gone," she says simply. "The rebels burned it. The magistrate taxed it. The soldiers smoked it." Her words captured the tragedy of an empire consumed from every side. And yet, amidst the chaos, something else emerges, a new way of thinking about China's future. Reformers begin to argue that the empire must adopt Western technology, not to surrender but to survive. "We must learn from the barbarians to defeat them," one scholar proclaims in a tea-house debate. Others resist, insisting that China's salvation lies in restoring Confucian order, purging foreign poison, and returning to the old ways. The debate will shape China's trajectory for decades. But for now, in the 1850s, rebellion spreads faster than reform. The empire is bleeding from 1,000 wounds, many self-inflicted, all made worse by the poison of the poppy. The smoke that began as an escape from suffering has become the spark for the greatest civil war the world has ever known. The Taiping Rebellion is just beginning, and the poison that helped fuel it shows no sign of fading. By the early 1850s, the rebellion that began as a small religious movement in Guangxi has erupted into a nationwide cataclysm. Hong Xiuquan's heavenly kingdom of great peace now commands hundreds of thousands of followers. His armies march under banners declaring "Destroy demons, uproot opium." They promise salvation from poverty, freedom from foreign domination, and an end to the poison that has ravaged China. The timing could not be worse for the Qing dynasty. Already weakened by indemnities from the Opium War, struggling with corruption and drained of silver, the empire is ill-prepared for what is coming. As Hong's armies sweep northward, gathering converts in every town and village, the rebellion grows into the largest civil war the world has ever seen. You arrive in Nanjing in 1853, just after it falls to the Taipings. The city, one of China's greatest, is transformed overnight into the capital of Hong's new heavenly kingdom. Imperial banners are torn down, replaced by symbols of the new order. Opium dens are raided, pipes smashed in public squares, addicts dragged into the streets for punishment or forced rehabilitation. At first, the spectacle inspires awe. Finally, someone is taking action, whispers a shopkeeper beside you. The dynasty did nothing but watch us die. Yet fear mingles with hope. The Taipings are zealous, intolerant, and often brutal. Families are divided by strict new codes of behavior. Dissent is punished swiftly. And still, the people endure, clinging to Hong's vision of liberation from the corruption that has plagued China for decades. For the Taipings, opium is more than a drug. It is the ultimate symbol of foreign domination and domestic weakness. They outlaw it completely within their territory, punishing not only smokers but growers and traders. The pipe is the demon's weapon, a Taiping commander declares to his troops. Destroy it, and you destroy the demon's hold on China. Yet enforcing this decree proves difficult. The addiction is too deeply rooted. Secret dens reappear in back alleys. Smugglers find new routes. Even some Taiping soldiers succumb. Hong's officers respond with escalating severity, executions, mass burnings of seized opium, public shaming of addicts. The result is fear, not freedom. Still, the message is clear. Unlike the Qing who bowed before foreign merchants, the Taipings will not compromise. Foreign powers view the rebellion with unease. On one hand, they admire the Taiping hostility toward opium and foreign influence. On the other, they fear instability that could threaten their trade. British merchants in Shanghai debate the question endlessly. If they win, our commerce is doomed, one argues. They will drive us out entirely. Another shakes his head. Better them than the Qing. At least they are strong enough to govern. Missionaries too are divided. Some see in Hong's Christian-inspired visions a chance to spread the gospel. Others recoil at his radical theology and violent methods. The result is hesitation. No foreign power offers the Taiping serious support. Instead, they watch from the sidelines as China tears itself apart. The scale of the conflict is staggering. Taiping armies sweep across central China, capturing cities, destroying Qing garrisons and redistributing land to peasants. Millions join their ranks, drawn by promises of justice, equality, and deliverance from opium. But millions more flee the chaos, their homes destroyed, their families scattered. You travel with a group of refugees along the Yangtze. They tell harrowing stories. Villages burned for resisting recruitment, crops seized for the heavenly army, officials executed for corruption. The Qing taxed us to death, says one farmer. The Taipings promised peace but gave us only fire. His words capture the tragedy of a movement born of righteous anger that descends into destruction. In Beijing, the emperor's court reels. Reports pour in of defeats, lost provinces, and cities falling like dominoes. Officials argue over strategy. Some propose appeasement, others demand ruthless suppression. Few grasp the scale of the crisis. Commissioner Lin Zexu, long dead, is remembered now as a man who tried to save China from foreign poison. Had we listened, one minister laments privately, perhaps this fire would not burn so fiercely now. But the dynasty cannot rely on moral clarity. It turns instead to regional warlords and mercenaries. Foreign advisors begin training Qing troops in modern tactics. Slowly, painfully, the empire claws back ground. But the cost is astronomical, in lives, in silver, in the very legitimacy of the Qing system. By the late 1850s, the rebellion has killed millions. Whole provinces are scarred by famine, disease, and slaughter. The opium epidemic, far from ended, continues in Qing-controlled regions, feeding despair and fueling Taiping propaganda. In Taiping territory, the drug may be outlawed, but the harshness of enforcement creates its own suffering. Families hide addicts rather than surrender them. Farmers conceal poppy fields in remote valleys. The demon cannot be exorcised so easily. Standing on the walls of Nanjing, you look out over a city swollen with refugees, soldiers, and preachers. The smoke of burning opium pipes mixes with the smoke of war. The heavenly kingdom of great peace has become a kingdom of fire and fear. The Taiping rebellion will rage for more than a decade, claiming an estimated 20 to 30 million lives. It is not only the bloodiest civil war in Chinese history, but the deadliest anywhere in the 19th century. And at its heart, though buried beneath layers of theology and politics, lies the poison of the poppy. Opium did not cause the rebellion, but it weakened the empire, fueled popular anger, and gave the Taipings a rallying cry. The smoke that dulled the senses of millions also ignited the flames of revolution. By the time the rebellion is finally crushed in 1864, the Qing dynasty will be hollowed out, surviving only with foreign support. And the poison will still be there, waiting, stronger than ever. As the Taiping rebellion rages across China, foreign powers watch with wary fascination. From their concessions in Shanghai, Guangzhou, and other treaty ports, merchants, missionaries, and diplomats peer into the chaos of the empire and see both danger and opportunity. The rebellion is a Chinese tragedy, but for outsiders, it is also a question. What does this upheaval mean for trade, profit, and power? In the bustling foreign settlement of Shanghai, British and American traders meet nightly in clubs along the Bund. Their talk is not of the human suffering unfolding inland, but of commerce. If the Taipings win, one merchant declares over his brandy, They'll outlaw opium entirely. Our profits will collapse. Another shakes his head. Perhaps, but they're also promising to open China to free trade. Imagine an empire without corrupt officials blocking every transaction. The merchants' concern is practical, not moral. They care little for Hong Xiuquan's visions or the Qing dynasty's survival. Their measure of events is silver, chests of tea, and crates of opium. War disrupts supply chains. Rebellion threatens profits. But chaos also weakens Chinese resistance to foreign demands. For missionaries, the Taiping movement sparks both excitement and dread. At first, Hong's claim of being the younger brother of Jesus Christ seems promising. Reports circulate of Taiping armies destroying idols, banning opium, and preaching a version of the Ten Commandments. Surely, one missionary writes home, this is the hand of providence at work in China. But when missionaries actually visit Taiping territory, they are unsettled. Hong's theology is wildly unorthodox, blending Christianity with his own visions and radical social reforms. His rule is authoritarian, his punishments harsh. One missionary writes bitterly, this is not Christianity, it is a perversion draped in Christian language. Still, the Taipings appeal to many missionaries as evidence that China is ready for conversion. They seek the truth, though in error, argues an American preacher in Canton. With guidance, they may yet be led to Christ. Others, more cautious, warn that supporting the Taipings risks alienating the Qing, whose cooperation is essential for missionary activity in treaty ports. In London and Paris, government officials follow reports from their envoys with growing interest. The Qing dynasty, once seen as immovable, now looks fragile. Should the West back the dynasty to preserve stability, or encourage the rebels to topple it and reshape China entirely? Charles Elliott, Britain's former trade superintendent, advises caution. The Taipings are unpredictable, he warns. They may shut us out entirely if they consolidate power. Others argue the opposite. The Qing are spent, one parliamentarian insists. If the rebels prevail, we can negotiate new treaties from a position of strength. Ultimately, foreign governments choose neutrality, at least officially. Their policy is simple: maintain trade at all costs. Yet neutrality proves difficult in practice. Foreign merchants sell weapons to both sides, while warships patrol rivers to protect treaty ports. The rebellion may be a Chinese war, but foreign interests shape its course at every turn. Shanghai becomes the focal point of foreign anxieties. By the mid-1850s, Taiping armies advance dangerously close to the city. Refugees pour in, swelling the population. Rumors spread that the Heavenly Army plans to storm the foreign concessions. Panic grows among merchants. If Shanghai falls, one British trader declares, our entire position in China collapses. In response, foreign powers form joint defense forces. British, French, and American sailors patrol the Bund. Cannons are mounted at key points. Volunteers drill in makeshift militias. For the first time, foreigners act not just as traders, but as defenders of their own enclave within China. The message is clear: treaty ports are off limits, no matter who wins the Civil War. When Taiping forces approach in 1860, they clash not only with Qing troops but with foreign defenders. The neutrality of the West ends in gunfire. By siding, reluctantly, with the Qing, the foreigners tip the balance of the war. Not out of loyalty, but out of fear that a victorious Taiping regime might threaten foreign privileges. For ordinary Chinese, foreign involvement feels like betrayal. The West, which claimed to bring civilization, Christianity, and prosperity, is seen instead as propping up a corrupt dynasty for its own gain. The barbarians sell us poison, a scholar in Shanghai laments, then save the emperor who allowed it, all to keep their silver flowing. The irony is not lost on foreign observers either. A French journalist writes, we claim to oppose tyranny, yet here we stand with the Manchu court, corrupt and decayed, against a rebellion that at least seeks reform. But commerce dictates our conscience. From London's Parliament to the counting houses of Canton, foreigners interpret the rebellion through their own lenses. To merchants, it is a risk to trade. To missionaries, a chance for souls. To diplomats, a calculation of power. Few see it as what it truly is, a nation tearing itself apart, weakened by foreign exploitation and poisoned by opium. You sit in a tea house in Shanghai one evening, listening as British traders boast of profits while outside, refugees beg for scraps. A missionary reads scripture to a group of Chinese children, unaware that Taiping preachers in the countryside are offering their own gospel. And in the governor's yamen, Qing officials plead with foreign envoys for weapons to fight the rebels. The foreign eyes on China see opportunity, not tragedy. But history will remember their role. By backing the Qing, they help ensure the rebellion fails. By maintaining the opium trade, they guarantee China's suffering continues. The Taiping cataclysm is China's to endure, but it unfolds under the watchful, calculating gaze of the world. By the mid-1850s, China is still reeling from the devastation of the Taiping Rebellion, but the foreign powers are not finished. For Britain and France, the Treaty of Nanjing has opened the door to trade, yet it has not gone far enough. The merchants demand more ports, freer access to China's interior, the legalization of opium, and the right for foreign ambassadors to reside in Beijing itself. When the Qing court hesitates, the Western powers look for an excuse to force the issue. They find it in a single incident. In October 1856, Chinese officials in Canton board a small vessel called the Arrow, suspecting it of piracy. The ship is Chinese-owned, crewed by Chinese, but it flies a British flag under a questionable license. 12 crew members are arrested. The British consul, Harry Parkes, demands their release, claiming the Arrow is under British protection. The Qing authorities refuse. To them, this is a routine matter of law enforcement. To the British, it is the perfect pretext. Parkes declares the Qing have insulted the British flag. In London, Lord Palmerston seizes on the incident, thundering in Parliament that China must be punished for violating British honor. Few mention that the Arrow's registration had expired, or that its flag was raised only after the arrests. The decision is made. War. The British warships soon bombard Canton. Buildings collapse, fires rage, and civilians flee in terror. French forces, citing the recent execution of a missionary as their own justification, join the assault. The city is partly occupied, its governor captured. Yet for the Western powers, this is only the beginning. Their demands are clear: greater access, greater privileges, and above all, the legalization of the opium trade. "We cannot tolerate interference with commerce," declares a British envoy. Commerce, in this case, means the right to sell poison openly. In 1858, joint Anglo-French forces sail north, targeting the strategic forts at Taku near the mouth of the Hai River, gateway to Beijing. Qing defenders fight valiantly, but their antiquated weapons are no match for modern artillery. The forts fall. The road to the capital lies open. Faced with disaster, the Qing court sues for peace. The treaties of Tientsin are signed. Their terms are staggering. 10 new ports opened to foreign trade, missionaries granted protection, foreign legations established in Beijing, indemnities imposed, and, most humiliating of all, the opium trade effectively legalized. The ink is barely dry before resistance begins. Qing officials stall, refusing to ratify the treaties. Commissioner Seng Rinchen strengthens defenses around the Taku forts, determined to resist another advance. In 1859, Anglo-French forces return to enforce compliance. At first, they suffer a setback at the rebuilt Taku forts, but by 1860 reinforcements arrive. The British and French push inland, overwhelming Chinese resistance and marching toward Beijing itself. The Qing court panics. Negotiations begin, but when Chinese forces capture and torture foreign envoys, including the indomitable Harry Parkes, diplomacy collapses. In retaliation, Lord Elgin, the British High Commissioner, orders the destruction of the Yuanminjiwan, the old summer palace. The palace is no ordinary residence. It is a wonder of the world, a sprawling complex of gardens, halls, and priceless treasures accumulated over centuries. For the Chinese, it is a symbol of imperial majesty and cultural achievement. For the British and French troops who storm it, it is a trove to be plundered. Over several days, the palace is looted, its treasures shipped to Europe. What cannot be carried away is burned. A French officer writes in horror, "I walked only on precious objects. Porcelain, jade, silks, all trampled underfoot. 2 centuries of art reduced to ashes." The psychological blow is devastating. To the Chinese, it is not just a military defeat, but an attack on their very civilization. The humiliation is total. With Beijing under threat, the emperor flees. His officials, desperate, sign the Convention of Peking in October 1860. The terms confirm and expand the treaties of Tientsin. More indemnities, more treaty ports, more rights for foreigners. The opium trade is now fully legal under international law. and, most symbolically painful, foreign diplomats are granted residence in Beijing itself, the sacred heart of the empire, once forbidden to barbarians. For the Qing dynasty, the Second Opium War is even more humiliating than the first. The empire that once saw itself as the center of civilization is now forced to accept foreign ambassadors on its soil, foreign troops near its capital, and foreign merchants selling opium in its markets. In the tea houses of Beijing, scholars whisper bitterly, "We fought to stop the poison. Now it is law." In the countryside, peasants shoulder heavier taxes to pay for indemnities. In treaty ports, Western merchants celebrate their triumph with champagne. The destruction of the Summer Palace becomes a wound that never heals, a symbol of cultural loss that will echo through generations. The legalization of opium deepens the addiction crisis, binding China's economy and society ever more tightly to the foreign poison. And yet, for the foreign powers, the war is framed as progress. "We have secured free trade," declares a British statesman. "We have opened China to civilization." To the Chinese, it feels like anything but civilization. It feels like conquest by another name. As you walk through the ruins of the Summer Palace, the air still thick with the scent of ash, you realize this war is not just about commerce or sovereignty. It is about the soul of a nation, its pride, its culture, its very sense of self. And that soul has been scarred, perhaps permanently. The Second Opium War has ended. But the century of humiliation is only deepening. The guns fall silent in 1860, but the silence is not peace. It is the silence of humiliation. The Qing dynasty, once the proud master of all under heaven, now bows before foreign merchants, diplomats, and missionaries. The Second Opium War has ended not with a battlefield victory for China but with treaties written in foreign languages, signed under duress, and enforced at the point of a cannon. In Beijing, the ruins of the old Summer Palace smolder for weeks. Its marble bridges, golden halls, and exquisite gardens are gone, reduced to ash. Looted treasures fill crates bound for London and Paris. For centuries, the Yuanminjiwan had symbolized the refinement of Chinese civilization. Now it symbolizes its vulnerability. A scholar, standing in the wreckage, whispers, "They have burned our soul." His words echo through the empire. The destruction of the Summer Palace is not just an act of war, it is a message. China's cultural achievements mean nothing against Western steel and fire. The Convention of Peking confirms China's humiliation. More treaty ports open. More indemnities are imposed. Foreign legations establish themselves in Beijing, their flags flying brazenly within sight of the Forbidden City. Missionaries gain unprecedented freedom, building churches in cities and villages alike. The opium trade, once contraband, is now legal, protected by the very treaties meant to bring peace. Foreign soldiers march openly in the streets of Canton and Tianjin. Extraterritorial courts ensure that Westerners are beyond the reach of Chinese law. A British sailor can kill a Chinese man and face only a token punishment from his own consular court. "This is not justice," laments a magistrate. "This is humiliation written into law." The legalization of opium transforms a crisis into a catastrophe. Imports soar. By the late 1860s, tens of thousands of chests arrive annually, carried openly into treaty ports. From there, the poison spreads inland, carried by riverboats, caravans, and corrupt officials who profit from its trade. Opium dens multiply. In every city, the sweet, acrid smoke curls into temples and tea houses. Officials, soldiers, scholars, no rank is immune. Entire villages sink into addiction. A missionary writes in despair, "I see men who once worked strong fields now lying in squalor, their pipes their only companions." The empire decays not by sword, but by smoke. The irony is bitter. China fought 2 wars to keep out the poison. Now treaties guarantee its spread. In Shanghai, the transformation is unmistakable. The bund becomes a showcase of Western dominance. European banks, warehouses, and consulates rise in imposing stone, their flags fluttering in the wind. Streets are patrolled by foreign police. Within the international settlement, gas lamps light wide boulevards, trams rattle past, and newspapers are printed in English and French. Across the river, the Chinese city remains crowded, narrow, and dimly lit. Poverty deepens as foreign firms dominate trade. "This is not China," a local merchant mutters, gazing across the water. "It is Europe carved into our flesh." The pattern repeats in treaty ports across the empire: Tianjin, Ningbo, Hankow, Xiamen. Each becomes an island of foreign privilege in a sea of Chinese humiliation. The dynasty, weakened by war, now faces rebellion upon rebellion. The Taiping Rebellion still rages in the interior, claiming millions of lives. The Nian Uprising spreads in the north. Muslim rebellions ignite in the southwest. Each movement draws strength from the same sources: poverty, corruption, addiction, and resentment toward a dynasty that seems unable to defend the nation. The Qing court issues edicts calling for reform, but implementation falters. Local officials, often addicts themselves, ignore orders. Provincial armies act more like independent warlords than imperial troops. The center is weakening, the peripheries drift further away. Amid the despair, new debates emerge among Chinese scholars. Some argue that the empire must learn from the West, adopting its weapons and methods while preserving Confucian morality. Others insist that the old ways must be defended at all costs, warning that Western technology will erode Chinese culture. In a tea house in Suzhou, two young scholars argue heatedly. Without Western guns we cannot defend ourselves, says one. Without our traditions we are no longer China, replies the other. Neither wins the argument. The empire wavers between reform and resistance, unable to choose a clear path. Meanwhile, foreign powers press their advantage. France seeks influence in the south. Russia pushes into Manchuria. The United States signs its own treaties, securing the same privileges as Britain and France. Diplomats in Europe refer casually to carving the Chinese melon, dividing the weakened empire into spheres of influence. An American observer in Shanghai remarks grimly, "The vultures are not waiting for the carcass to die. They are feeding while it still breathes." For ordinary Chinese, life grows harder. Taxes rise to pay indemnities. Land is lost to pay debts. Families fracture under the weight of addiction. And yet, in villages far from treaty ports, people still sow rice, celebrate festivals, and cling to traditions that have survived dynasties and invasions before. "China is old," says a peasant farmer to you one evening as he shares a bowl of rice. "Dynasties rise and fall. The barbarians come and go. But China remains." His words contain both defiance and resignation. The empire may weaken, but the civilization endures. The Second Opium War does not just deepen China's humiliation, it sets the stage for what Chinese historians will later call the Century of Humiliation. From the 1840s to the mid-20th century, foreign powers will exploit China's weakness, carving concessions, demanding privileges, and feeding the addiction that began with the poppy. The empire's decline is no longer a question of if, but of how far. By the 1870s, the story of opium in China has taken a cruel twist. What began as foreign contraband, smuggled into coastal cities, is now planted in China's own soil. The empire that once fought to expel the poison has become its largest cultivator. The foreign powers opened the door, but the Chinese economy has walked through it willingly, if reluctantly, and transformed the flower into a lifeline of revenue and survival. Travel through Yunnan or Sichuan, and you see it everywhere. Hillsides blanketed not with rice or tea, but with delicate poppies, their white and pink petals swaying in the breeze. Farmers score the seed pods, collecting the sticky brown resin. It stains their hands, seeps into their nails. The air smells faintly sweet, but beneath it lies bitterness. "I grew rice for 30 years, says a farmer in Yunnan, wiping sweat from his brow. "We barely ate. The harvest failed too often, the taxes were too high. But with poppies I can pay the magistrate, feed my children, even buy new tools." His voice carries no pride, only weary pragmatism. For countless families, the poppy is the difference between hunger and survival. The Qing government, desperate for revenue after decades of indemnities, quietly tolerates and even encourages opium cultivation. Provincial officials, often corrupt or addicted themselves, impose taxes on poppy farmers. The revenue flows upward, filling empty treasuries. In some provinces, as much as 50% of government income comes directly or indirectly from opium. An official in Sichuan admits privately, "Without opium taxes, we cannot pay our troops. Without troops, we cannot fight the rebels. Without fighting the rebels, the dynasty falls. And so we poison our people to preserve our rule." The logic is undeniable and devastating. Foreign merchants who once smuggled Indian opium into China now profit in a new way. They import less raw opium, but they dominate the processing and distribution networks, often in league with Chinese middlemen. British ships still deliver tons of Indian opium each year, but domestic production soon outpaces imports. By the end of the century, China produces nearly 85% of the opium it consumes. In treaty ports, warehouses overflow with both Indian and domestic opium. The drug, once contraband, now circulates like tea or silk. In Shanghai's foreign concession, an English trader explains, "We no longer need to push it. The Chinese grow their own. All we do is supply the pipes, the paraphernalia, and the capital to move it." He smiles grimly. The market sustains itself. For ordinary Chinese, the result is catastrophic. Addiction spreads from the coast to the interior, from soldiers to scholars, from laborers to landowners. In a squalid inn in Hunan, you see men sprawled on bamboo mats, their cheeks sunken, their eyes glazed. The air is thick with smoke. A young man, no more than 20, coughs violently as he tries to light his pipe. "My father smoked," he tells you weakly. "My brother smoked. Now I smoke. What else is there?" The cycle is generational. Families trapped in poverty find in opium both an escape and an income. Some grow it, others sell it, nearly all suffer from it. Chinese reformers rail against the poison. Pamphlets circulate condemning opium as the empire's true enemy. "The barbarians burned our palaces," one writer declares, "but we ourselves burn our bodies." Scholar officials propose eradication campaigns, but they meet resistance at every level. A governor in Hunan explains bluntly, "I cannot destroy the fields. The people will revolt if I take away their only profit. The treasuries will collapse if I end the tax. The court will dismiss me for failing to meet quotas. Reform is impossible." And so the fields remain. Opium becomes not just a crop, but a currency. Farmers pay debts with bricks of dried resin. Officials accept bribes in pipes and powder. Warlords finance their armies with opium revenue. Even rebels who denounce foreign poison often grow and sell it to sustain their campaigns. By the 1880s, the contradiction is unbearable. The Qing government publicly condemns opium in edicts, while privately depending on it for survival. China, once victim of foreign exploitation, has become complicit in its own poisoning. Western observers marvel at the irony. A French traveler writes, "The Chinese curse us for introducing the poppy, yet now their hills bloom brighter with it than ours. They have turned our weapon into their livelihood." British officials, meanwhile, are pleased. "If the Chinese grow their own," one notes, "there will be no need for us to enforce the trade. They have enslaved themselves." But the true cost cannot be measured in revenue or trade. It is written in broken families, in villages hollowed out by addiction, in scholars who abandon their books for the pipe, in soldiers who collapse before a battle. In a temple courtyard in Sichuan, you encounter a monk tending to a handful of recovering addicts. "They come to us because they have nowhere else to go," he says quietly. "We pray, we feed them, we lock them away from the pipe. Some survive. Most do not. The flower blooms, but it blooms death." By the end of the 19th century, opium is no longer just a foreign scourge. It is China's economy, its curse, and its crutch. To eradicate it would mean famine, financial collapse, and rebellion. To keep it means continued decay. The dynasty chooses the latter, and with it, seals its fate. The poppy has become not only a drug but a system that binds farmers, officials, merchants, and rulers in a chain of dependency. And as the empire sinks deeper into the smoke, its enemies, foreign and domestic, prepare to exploit its weakness once again. By the 1890s, the Qing dynasty is staggering. The Taiping and Yin rebellions have drained its strength, indemnities from 2 opium wars have bankrupted its treasury, and the fields of poppies have corroded its society. To foreign powers, China is no longer a great empire to be feared. It is a wounded animal, ripe for division. Diplomats in Europe speak openly of carving the Chinese melon. In the parlors of London, Paris, and Berlin, maps of China are spread across polished tables. Colored pencils mark out spheres of influence. Russia eyes Manchuria, seeking access to warm water ports. Germany sets its sights on Shandong, citing missionary deaths as justification. France pushes into the south, linking its holdings in Indochina with Chinese territory. Britain, already holding Hong Kong and dominating trade along the Yangtze, expands into the new territories. "It is like vultures around a carcass," remarks an American observer. The beast is not yet dead, but already the feast begins. Nowhere is this carving more visible than in Shanghai. The Bund is lined with grand European banks and trading houses, their facades gleaming in the sun. Flags of many nations flutter over consulates. Inside the international settlement, trams rattle past, foreign police patrol the streets, and gas lamps glow at night. The streets are broad and orderly, lined with stone buildings in the style of London and Paris. Across the creek, the Chinese city remains crowded, narrow, and impoverished. Wooden houses lean against each other. Streets are muddy, markets noisy. Addiction gnaws at the population. The contrast is so stark it feels like crossing not just a canal but a century. A Chinese merchant, standing on the Bund, mutters bitterly, "This is not Shanghai. This is Europe on Chinese soil." The final confirmation of China's weakness comes in 1895, when it is defeated not by Britain or France, but by Japan, a country that once looked to China as its teacher. In the First Sino-Japanese War, modernized Japanese troops and warships crushed Qing forces. The Treaty of Shimonoseki strips China of Taiwan and Korea, imposes huge indemnities, and grants Japan new privileges in Manchuria. The shock reverberates across the empire. "Even Japan, once our student, now defeats the teacher," laments a scholar in Beijing. For foreign powers, the message is clear. China is no longer capable of resisting any modern nation. Following China's defeat by Japan, the scramble accelerates. Germany demands Shandong, citing missionary deaths. Russia seizes Port Arthur. Britain leases Weihaiwei and expands from Hong Kong into the new territories. France strengthens its hold in the south. Each power extracts new concessions, mines, and railways. Chinese officials, desperate, grant privileges they cannot refuse. In 1898, a British diplomat describes it bluntly, "We do not need to conquer China. We only need to sign papers." For ordinary Chinese, the humiliation is unbearable. Taxes rise to pay new indemnities. Land is seized for foreign railways. Workers labor in mines owned by foreigners. Missionaries, protected by treaty rights, spread Christianity deep into the countryside, sometimes trampling on local customs that a teacher in Shandong tries to explain the situation to his students. "The foreigners divide our land as if slicing a melon," he says. "They take the sweetest pieces for themselves and leave us the rind." The children listen, their eyes wide with fear and anger. Amid this imperial feeding frenzy, opium remains the quiet constant. Foreign merchants profit from imports, while Chinese provinces rely on domestic cultivation for revenue. In treaty ports, crates of the drug sit alongside tea and silk as legitimate trade. The poison that once weakened the empire militarily now ensures it remains pliable politically. "An addicted nation does not resist," notes a French diplomat. That is the truth of China. Not all accept this fate. Reformers in Beijing and the provinces call for modernization. Railways, factories, modern schools, Western science. "We must learn from the barbarians in order to resist them," proclaims one reformer. Others argue for a return to Confucian purity, blaming foreign ideas as much as foreign armies for China's decline. The court, paralyzed by factional disputes and the influence of the Empress Dowager Cixi, fails to act decisively. The result is more drift, more weakness, more concessions that end Shanghai and Tianjin. Foreign residents gather in exclusive clubs, sipping brandy under chandeliers while Chinese servants pour their drinks. To them, China's decline is not tragedy but convenience. "Why should we fight for empire?" a British merchant boasts, "when China gives it away?" His companions laugh, clinking glasses, unaware, or uncaring, that their presence fuels growing resentment outside their gates. By the dawn of the 20th century, China is no longer an empire in control of its destiny. It is a geographic space divided into spheres of influence, each foreign power claiming its slice of the melon. Its economy is distorted by opium, its sovereignty eroded by treaties, its people demoralized by addiction and humiliation. And yet, beneath the smoke and shadows, something stirs. A new generation of students, reformers, and revolutionaries begins to ask, if the dynasty cannot defend China, who will? The melon may be carved, but the seeds of resistance are being sown. By the turn of the 20th century, the Qing dynasty has endured 6 decades of humiliation. 2 opium wars, crushing indemnities, the carving up of its territory, and the spread of addiction have hollowed out the empire. Foreign flags fly in its ports, foreign soldiers patrol its cities, and foreign merchants control its trade. For the first time in its long history, China is no longer master of its own fate. And yet, even as the empire staggers, the seeds of something new begin to stir. In northern China, resentment toward foreigners and their privileges explodes into violence. Bands of peasants and martial artists calling themselves the Righteous and Harmonious Fists, later known to the West as Boxers, rise in revolt. They attack missionaries, burn churches, and murder Chinese converts. "Drive out the foreign devils," becomes their cry. At first, the Qing court wavers. Should it suppress the Boxers or use them as allies? The Empress Dowager Cixi chooses the latter, seeing in their fury a chance to strike back at foreign powers. In 1900, Boxers flood into Beijing, laying siege to the foreign legation quarter. Foreign troops from 8 nations, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, Japan, the United States, Italy, and Austria-Hungary, march to relieve their countrymen. The clash is brief and brutal. The Qing armies, weakened by corruption and opium, crumble. Beijing falls to the Allied forces. Looting, executions, and atrocities follow. The Boxer Protocol of 1901 imposes yet another crushing indemnity: 450 million taels of silver, more than the government's annual revenue, to be paid over 39 years with interest. Foreign troops gain the right to station permanently in Beijing. The dynasty has gambled on the Boxers, and lost everything. Even as rebellion fails, a new kind of resistance begins. Chinese students, some educated abroad in Japan, Europe, or the United States, return with new ideas: constitutional government, industrialization, nationalism. They speak of railways, factories, newspapers, parliaments. In Shanghai's tea houses, young men debate revolution. In Beijing's universities, students read translations of Western science and politics. Pamphlets circulate calling for the end of Manchu rule. If the dynasty cannot defend China, one declares, then the people must. The memory of the Opium Wars looms large in these discussions. The poison that once symbolized foreign exploitation now serves as a rallying cry for reform. "We were broken by smoke," a reformer writes, "but in that smoke, we see clearly that only change can save us." The Qing court, paralyzed by factionalism and tradition, proves incapable of meaningful reform. The self-strengthening movement falters, modernization efforts collapse under corruption, and the empire remains dependent on opium revenue even as it condemns the drug in edicts. Meanwhile, foreign powers continue to squeeze. Russia builds railways in Manchuria. Germany expands its concessions in Shandong. Britain and France deepen their control of trade and finance. "We are no longer a nation," laments a Chinese official, "but a carcass carved by knives." The final blow comes not from foreigners but from within. In 1911, revolution erupts in Wuhan. Soldiers mutiny, provinces declare independence, and within weeks the Qing dynasty collapses. The last emperor, a child named Puyi, abdicates. 2,000 years of imperial rule end. From the first chests of opium smuggled into Canton to the abdication of the last emperor, a through line of humiliation runs. The Opium Wars shattered the myth of Chinese invincibility. The addiction that followed weakened its society from within. Foreign treaties eroded sovereignty piece by piece. Rebellions killed tens of millions but failed to restore dignity. By the early 20th century, China had endured what historians would call its century of humiliation. And yet, within this dark century, seeds of renewal were planted. Reformers, revolutionaries, and intellectuals began to imagine a new China. Modern, independent, and strong enough to resist foreign domination. In 1909, in a tea house overlooking the foreign concessions of Shanghai, an elderly scholar shares his thoughts with you. His beard is white, his eyes sharp despite his years. "I was a boy when Commissioner Lin Zexu stood against the opium traders," he says softly. "We thought him severe, even foolish. But he was the only one who saw clearly. He knew that opium was not merely a drug, it was the beginning of the end. And he was right." He gestures toward the Bund, where foreign banks and consulates tower over the river. "We lost our palaces, our silver, our pride. But we did not lose ourselves. China is old. Empires rise and fall, but China endures. The poison broke us, but it also awakened us. Someday perhaps we will rise again." As the 20th century begins, opium remains everywhere. In the fields of Yunnan, in the dens of Shanghai, in the veins of officials and peasants alike. It is both livelihood and curse, tax revenue and social ruin. but it is also memory. A reminder of how weakness invites aggression, how arrogance blinds empires, and how addiction, whether to drugs, tradition, or pride, can topple even the mightiest civilization. The poppy, once a foreign weapon, became China's economy, its sickness, and finally its lesson. The empire fell, but the nation endured. Out of humiliation, seeds of revolution took root. The story of China's encounter with opium is not just the story of a drug. It is the story of transformation, from empire to republic, from arrogance to awakening. It is a reminder that no civilization, however ancient, is immune to decline. And yet, it is also a testament to resilience. For though opium scarred China for a century, it did not destroy it. The smoke cleared, the seeds sprouted, and a new chapter began.